Okay, we're ready. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Cheney?
Here.
Trustee Foster?
Here.
Mayor Newhart?
Here.
Trustee Flora?
Here.
Trustee McKnight?
Here.
Stephen Gaba?
Present.
Building Inspector Code Enforcement Officer Boris Rodzinski?
Here.
DPW Supervisor Mike Mosier is absent.
May I have a motion to accept the following reports from September 2023, the Clerk's Office, Tax Collection, and Justice Department?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to pay all approved and audited claims in the amount of $208,791.19.
So move.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
The chief isn't here. Do you have anything to report to the board?
Tonight.
No, thank you. We have a couple of presentations, and the first on the agenda is Convergent Battery Storage Update, but I do not see a representative from Convergent. Oh, this gentleman is.
Yeah,
Oh, hi, how are you?
doing well, thanks.
Mayor Newhart?
Frank Geneva.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, you've got our floor. If you don't mind introducing yourself for the record, and please speak to the board.
Great, of course. We have a prepared set of remarks. There are a lot of facts and data, timelines that we want to walk the board and the community through. And then after we finish, I'll open up for questions, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Frank Geneva. I'm the Chief Operating and Financial Officer at Convergent and a co-founder of the business. I know everyone's eager to learn about the incidents at our two Warwick project locations. Before we get started, we want to apologize to the Warwick community and to the village of Warwick in particular for the disruption and uncertainty this has caused. We also want to once again thank the first responders and the community who participated in responding to this event. We particularly appreciate the leadership of Chief Contaxis of the Warwick Fire District, Chief Ratter in the Warwick Police Department, and Orange County and Warwick Emergency Services, along with Mayor Newhart, Supervisor Sweeten, for their incredible management, responsiveness, and competence to ensure everyone's safety. We also want to thank everyone here for their patience as the investigation was carried out and a report was produced. We want to make sure that we came before you with a meaningful update, and we look forward to providing that to you tonight. Before we walk through what happened, we want to quickly clarify what these systems are and what they are doing for the community at large. All three battery storage systems that Convergent owns and operates in Warwick are specifically designed to enhance Orange and Rockland's utility infrastructure, improve the power grid's reliability, and prevent the community from experiencing power disruptions. In order to achieve this goal, the battery storage systems are required to be installed in specific locations, which are dictated by the design of Orange and Rockland's electricity system. In the areas where load growth, which is where electricity is needed, is present. In other words, this community is using more electricity than the grid infrastructure can support, and battery storage can cost effectively ensure the reliability of that grid. Our three battery storage systems in Warwick have the potential to increase reliability for approximately 7,500 Orange and Rockland customers in this area, and can also reduce electricity costs. These batteries, which are lithium ion, similar to the batteries that everyone has in their cell phones, store energy from the electric grid when there's a surplus of electricity and discharge it back onto the grid when it's needed most. These systems are a resource for Orange and Rockland, the utility, to help meet the increasing demand for electricity in this area. In other words, battery storage is critical to the electrical infrastructure of this growing community to keep costs low and power reliable. These systems are not, as some members of the media reported, warehouses to store batteries. Systems like these are used safely in communities nationwide, including ones that are owned and operated by Convergent. The battery systems are not manufactured by Convergent. We procure them from Tier 1 suppliers, and in this situation, the manufacturer is a company called Powin. All right, let's get into what happened specifically. Convergent developed and installed three battery storage systems across two locations in Warwick. Two are co-located behind the bus depot on County Road 1A, which we refer to as West Warwick 1 and West Warwick 2, and one is located behind the parking lot at the Business Center on Church Street, which we refer to as West Warwick 3. West Warwick 2 and West Warwick 3, which use the Powin centipede model, experienced issues that we are here to discuss with you tonight. West Warwick 1, which is a different model system known as the Powin Stack 360, did not experience any issues. Both West Warwick 1, the Powin Stack 360, and West Warwick 2, the Powin centipede, are within the fence adjacent to the bus depot. The events at both sites coincided with heavy rains and high winds. Starting with West Warwick 3 on County Road 1A, on the evening of June 26th, heat and fire alarms were triggered, fire suppressant automatically deployed, and smoke was observed at the battery storage system at our Church Street location. Only one battery container containing the battery cells out of a total of 28 on site was impacted, and the event did not extend to any other container. Again, when we're talking about containers, we're talking about the big white boxes that the individual battery cells sit in. These containers house all equipment required to monitor, cool, heat, and control the batteries, in addition to housing the batteries themselves.
Sir, I'm sorry, are you still talking about the West Street location?
Yes, this
Okay.
is for West Warwick 3, which, sorry, this is Church Street, West Warwick 3.
Oh, we're talking about Church Street now.
Yeah, this is Church,
So 1 out of 28 is what you said.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
The findings of the root cause analysis indicate that a product-related defect with these Powin centipede systems led to the electrical fire. Specifically, under the weather conditions that evening, water infiltrated the containers where it shouldn't have, causing an electrical short that sparked a brief electrical fire that was subsequently extinguished with the fire suppression system located within the container. Moving on to West Warwick 2 at the school, early in the morning of June 27th, an audible alarm was reported. Upon conducting a visual inspection, elevated temperature and smoke damage was noted on one of the 14 Powin centipede containers at the site, suggesting the presence of a thermal event occurring inside. Approximately 6 hours later, smoke was observed in the same unit and a fire became visible. This fire eventually consumed the 7 Powin centipede containers in the lineup over approximately 36 hours before extinguishing. The fire did not spread beyond the affected lineup and remained contained within the perimeter of the cement pads on which the affected containers rest. Convergent staff was on site at both project locations, assisting emergency responders and monitoring these events starting within minutes of the first indication of trouble at West Warwick 3, which is the Church Street location. Powin staff arrived early the next morning to provide additional support. We want to assure you that we take these events very seriously. This was the first fire we experienced in our company's 12-year history. The response to these events was coordinated. Convergent and Powin were actively on site throughout the duration of both incidents, supporting local first responders to the best of our ability and trying to determine what happened. We built this site with safety in mind, and because of these design principles, the fire did not spread beyond the system's fence line. Most importantly, no one was injured in the event, and the air monitoring conducted at the bus depot location by the county's hazmat team during the incident revealed that the air was safe. In addition to addressing your concerns in a few moments, we are here to share today the results of the independent investigation into what happened, which is finally completed. At a very high level, the root cause analysis allows Powin and Convergent to conclusively determine that the battery containers that are central to Powin centipede product were supposed to be watertight in accordance with the contractual specifications, and they were not. The root cause analysis was led by third-party industry leader D&V Energy USA with data provided by Powin. The root cause analysis was a thorough investigation led by experts with robust technical and forensic experience that conducted physical inspections as well as data analysis. The school district had an observer company accompany the process in Veritex, and several insurance companies also participated, giving us confidence in the outcome. The findings conclusively state that water infiltration is the common point of failure with the Powin centipede systems present at both sites. Again, the Powin Stack 360 had no issues. Preventing water infiltration is critical because it presents a hazard when in contact with electrical equipment and batteries, no different than many other electrical products. It is believed that this product-related failure led to an electrical fire that cascaded into a battery fire at West Warwick 2. In other words, it has been concluded that a third-party product failure is concluded to be the root cause of the incidents we experienced in Warwick. Our third system in Warwick, again, West Warwick 1, is the Powin Stack 360 model, not the Centipede. The Powin Stack 360 did not experience any issues. We know there was some discussion at the previous board meeting about our choice of supplier, specifically Powin versus GE. We want to address that with you directly. We originally planned to use GE systems at these sites, but due to COVID-related supply chain disruptions affecting GE's ability to supply its products in time to address Orange and Rockland's system needs, Convergent finalized the product design with Powin systems, which are functionally equivalent. Powin, like GE, is another top-tier battery system manufacturer that we have worked with in other locations for several years without incident. We are confident that our final selection is well within the envelope of the approved site plan for the project, and it's functionally equivalent to the GE system. Furthermore, the construction permit issued in May of 2022 was specifically for the installation of these Powin systems, as communicated to the building department in great detail through the construction permit submittal process. We are also confident with the building inspector's approval for the project with the Powin Centipede system that it was proper. We want to assure you that this was not a cost-cutting measure. Convergent paid more for the Powin systems than it would have paid for the GE systems. Just before we take your questions, we want to assure you that we take these events very seriously and are currently working within our own business to identify opportunities for improvement, including collaboration with our vendors who are responsible for designing and manufacturing these battery systems. As a leading provider of energy storage solutions in North America, we're constantly collecting data from our operating fleet to evaluate enhancements to our practices and our procedures. All of our systems are monitored 24/7, 365. This allowed us to activate emergency response protocols within minutes of becoming aware of each incident and to be on site within minutes of both incidents at Warwick. Meeting industry best practices on system design and operations has unfortunately not reduced all risks. We plan to get more involved in manufacturer testing in the future and for any proposed solutions here. We met all the required safety standards and are now looking at ways to go beyond current industry requirements. Also, we are actively reviewing our emergency response plans to address some of the information provided by the root cause analysis, along with incorporating some feedback we received from the Warwick Fire Department. You're likely wondering what the plan is for West Warwick 3 and 2, and motivated as we are to reduce any chance of future product issues. We want to be thoughtful and methodical and prioritize safety. We're in no rush, and Powin has work to do to address the lessons learned from the root cause analysis, fix their product issues, and prove their suitability before we come back to these authorities. In terms of timing, a potential solution would most likely not be available until the second half of 2024. So that's the end of the written remarks. Again, there's a lot of detail there. We wanted to make sure that everything was transferred efficiently. We thank you all for the time today, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Board, I'll give it to you, and if you'd like to ask.
So thank you for being here. I noticed you did present to the school board a couple weeks back. How similar were your remarks to them as to this board?
Yeah, very similar. As you're aware, the products that we have installed at both locations are similar. The same product, the Centipede product, is exactly the same, and the root cause analysis has showed that the root cause of the issue is the SAIT, which is water infiltration into those cabinets. And that's really, at the heart of what we're trying, the information that we're trying to transfer to the agencies and to the community, the results of that analysis.
Thank you. And how many Centipede units have been deployed successfully around the globe, the same model that we have?
Yeah, it's a good question. Convergent, as I noted in my, my established remarks, we're purchasing these systems from Powin. The exact number of units that are in the field, operational, you know, it's not clear to us, to Convergent, since we're not selling those units directly.
Have you deployed any successfully in this area?
Yeah, we have POWIN systems throughout our portfolio.
But the Centipede models specifically, the
Not the
ones that have
Centipede model
problems.
specifically, no.
Yeah, my understanding was that these were the first ones installed of their kind. Is there any validity to that?
So, as a business, we obviously prioritize safety. You know, as I noted, we've had POWIN systems in our portfolio for years, going back over the last 12 years of our business. And product evolution is a standard thing for every manufacturer. So, you know, again, what we lean on when we focus on the partners that we work with is the track record of the company. You know, POWIN has been around since the infancy of the battery storage sector, along with, you know, the other tier 1 providers. So based on our operating history with them, the fact that we've been operating their systems in our portfolio for a number of years, you know, that's what gave us confidence in procuring the Centipede product.
Did you ask them if there were any other successful deployments of that Centipede product?
It's not something you would typically ask a manufacturer, whether or not there were successful deployments. You know, it's what does successful mean per se? You know, I think is
Well, for example,
subjective, but
not a fire and environmental hazard. I'd say that would
yeah,
be
there
an
weren't.
easy definition.
There weren't. We know that for sure.
I think the question is whether or not these were pilots.
They
Like
were
that these
pilots.
were the first installation of the centipedes, because that was the,
Yeah, it was
intelligence.
absolutely not a pilot, right? This is a fully commercial product. It's not a beta version. It's a product that POWIN is still pushing and selling to the broader market, you know, in thousands. I don't know the exact number. So this is not a pilot project. This was not a beta version of the product. This was a fully commercialized product that we purchased.
Thank you. So in September 2020, you presented to the planning board, or not you specifically, someone from Convergent presented to the planning board. And one of the topics of conversation was the Convergent emergency response plan. So I know you addressed that GE was originally the designed manufacturer. You also referenced supply chain issues. After you realized there were supply chain issues and you couldn't get, presumably you couldn't get the GE models, and you swapped it out for POWIN, did you update that emergency response plan and give it to the village or the school board, for that matter?
I know there were updates made to a number of documents that we had submitted, obviously including the construction permit, but specifically on the ERP, I don't have that answer handy.
Well, I was on the planning board at the time. I think the answer to that is no. And I'm looking at the emergency response plan, and several times it's referenced if there's a problem that GE would be part of the emergency response team. There's also photos of the GE units. I understand you can swap that out, but if a portion of that emergency response plan is around a particular vendor, wouldn't it make sense to, if you update the equipment, to also have the proper response teams also included in this?
Yeah, so the response teams are Convergent, right? So that the emergency contacts are not the manufacturers directly. Again, as I noted in my prepared remarks, these are like-for-like systems. So the change of GE to POWIN does not change anything associated with the emergency response plan. They're both lithium-ion batteries, iron phosphate chemistry. Containerization strategy and design is the same. The way that a fire is dealt with is the same. So there would be no material changes to the emergency response plan by making that change. And again, as I noted, you know, in my remarks, it's a like-for-like swap. There are no material differences whatsoever between the two products. And POWIN and GE are both considered tier 1 vendors in the space, as validated by Veritex, who's supporting the school district alongside of us in the analysis.
was the GE product the centipede? Like, very similar to the centipede?
Yeah, very similar.
And POWIN was here during the incident,
They were.
yes.
Yeah, alongside me personally and you know, a large contingent from Convergent and POWIN the first day that the events happened.
What are the basic differences between the Centipede model and the model or the installation that was not affected by a fire?
Yeah, the major difference, there's a big difference visually, which is the way that the batteries are containerized. So the enclosure around it looks different. You know, and again, you know, as I had stated in my remarks, the Powin Stack 360, which is West Warwick 1, which was unaffected, you know, did not have any water infiltration, but the Powin Centipede systems did. And, you know, one of the big differences, which is a great question to your point, is the way that the batteries are containerized and wrapped. And naturally, as I highlighted, you know, there was a product failure in that weatherproofing of that container.
So why was there a mix in Warwick with the stacked and the centipedes?
Yeah. So at that point in time, you know, Powin was supporting both product lines. And, you know, again, a lot of, you know, the decision-making that was done between GE and Powin was to support Orange and Rockland in their schedule to manage, you know, kind of load growth and some of the issues, the reliability-related concerns they had on the network. So, you know, we were prioritizing tier one vendors that we worked with before and, you know, getting solutions in place to support their network.
But why didn't you go with 3 of the stacked units as opposed to kind of, it sounds to me like the stacked units are older units, been technology.
They're still
specific.
supporting the product, but it was the previous version of the product, that's right. Yeah,
So-
part of it is due to site constraints and site layout and geometry. Also, you know, again, you know, getting systems online for Orange and Rockland, the schedule associated with Orange and Rockland's need was a big consideration in those decisions.
And has Convergent deployed these centipede models elsewhere in New York at this point in time? And were these the first 2 that entered your systems?
So the Powin Centipede, yes, but the Powin product and the brand in general, no.
So these were the first deployments of the centipede product by Convergent?
Correct.
Anywhere in New York?
Correct.
So there are a number of fires in upstate New York, correct? I mean, but were they related to your company? Were they Convergent related? One was in town of Lyme, and I'm just trying to think. Jefferson County.
Yeah, that's the town of Lyme, Shomo
Shomo,
was
yeah.
another Convergent project. That was a GE system. It was a hybrid solar and battery storage project in Shomo, New York. That was, again, like I said, it was a GE system, whereas earlier in the root cause analysis process. So fortunately, I don't have answers, which is part of the reason why it took us a little while to come to this, because we wanted firm answers and data to share with you conclusively as to what the cause of the problem was. And for that project in upstate New York, we're not there yet.
How,
Did they have a centipede related product in that no,
No, not at all.
not at all.
Yep.
how many fires has Convergent had to respond to
Two
of your product?
of our projects, 2.
The 2 in Warwick?
I'm sorry, I was considering 1 in Warwick, but West Warwick 3, West Warwick 2,
In
and
Shomo.
the 1 in Shomo.
One of the frustrations we heard from our fire chief was that he felt like he didn't have the proper training. He and his team didn't have the proper training from your company in emergency response. He had the resources to get that training for his team, but is that something that you were supposed to offer, or I don't understand what the disconnect was there.
So we conducted a training session for Chief Contaxis in the fire department in the
Okay.
fall of 2022.
Okay.
And that was in the earlier stages of project construction. And we were scheduled with the chief to do the final training of the system the week that the events occurred.
Okay.
So this is not, you know, we take this aspect of it very seriously. This is something that, there was initial training done, and then there was a final training. Again, giving the fire department the opportunity to do that training on the finished system with all the boxes in place and the site safe is a standard approach for us.
West Warwick 1 and 2 were almost fully energized at the time of the fire. And West Warwick 3 had just begun that process. So was that any difference in the findings in your report? Was there any difference in that, you had a greater energy, storage in that product at that time, and less in this one on Church Street.
It was certainly noted that is indeed true, Mayor. But again, the root cause, which was the focus of the report for both situations, was absolutely water infiltration into the containers. And the RCA, the root cause analysis, did not highlight, the amount of energy that was being stored in the batteries as a concern.
Okay.
The investigation report you referred to, is that going to be shared with the fire department, police, and the municipalities?
It will be, yeah. So Powin is what we did was we had our independent consultant work alongside Powin's independent consultant, along with the school district's consultant, to have them collectively sign off on that report. There is an abridged version that basically cuts to the heart of the issue instead of going through 70 pages of technical jargon that I know Powin is interested in sharing with the group. And what we've done with Dr. Leach of the school board is set up a separate call with Powin to go through the process to get that shared with the board.
And do you have a timetable for that?
We have a call set up with Powin this week. It's in the near term, so we're talking weeks here.
And that's the full report, not just a summary.
It'll be the
Right.
abridged version of the report, which is not 70 pages of technical graphs and charts and all that.
Can the municipality have the full report?
We can certainly talk to Powin, who owns the report, absolutely.
Sure.
I'm sorry, are you a colleague at Convergent as well?
I'm a colleague, yeah.
Okay, and what's your name?
I'm Kate. Hello.
Kate? Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your last name?
My last name is Siskel,
Okay.
Siskel.
I was curious if you had been to I don't recall the name, if you'd been to a planning board meeting in the past.
No, first time.
Okay. Because there was a Miss Coase.
Yes.
Am I saying that
Yep,
correctly?
yep.
Okay. Because the idea of a fire and a spill, those were brought forth in front of the planning board. And the response that we got was that if it's an actual fire, the fire protection will kick in, which is a gas that fills in the container and turns into a foam when it hits air and puts out the fire. All the containers are steel rated for fire, so there's not a major concern if it's spreading beyond the containers themselves. So, when you come to a municipality and you go to a planning board, that's for site plan approval. We do have an attorney and an engineer present at most meetings. But the board is made up of residents who aren't battery storage or fire experts necessarily. So when those questions are asked, and it's really, on Convergent to address them, I get the sense that any concerns were just almost dismissed in a way, because they're saying, oh, there's no real concern for fire. And then I vividly recall the conversation turned to everything else that goes into a site plan. Like there would be some lights there. Oh, it's going to cause light pollution for some of the residents in the park. So that part it felt quickly glossed over when I was there. Can you speak to that in terms of when you talk about, and this was in the context of an emergency response plan and everything, and fire prevention plan. It seems like now that's not the case, right? That yes, there may have been a gas that turns into foam inside the containers, that there are steel containers that are supposed to contain the fire, but we've seen otherwise, right? And the reason it's concerning is because it could put a lot of residents at risk. And that's our number one concern here.
Yeah, I mean, I was not there at the meeting. What I can say is that what you just went over, every piece about that statement is true. These are steel enclosures. There is fire suppression inside of the containers. And, just based on the data, these are very, very low outlier situations statistically. So, I can't speak to how quickly the conversation advanced and moved beyond the discussion of the ERP plan or specifically about the fire suppression that's in the containers. But what I can say is that all those statements that were made are true. But again, I can't speak to how quickly the conversation evolved in the meeting because I wasn't there.
So true on it seems like from a technical perspective, and we have a board worried about fire, you can see how that would allay potential concerns if no one there is equipped to really pick apart the technical response, right? Because there still was an event, and that's why we're all
Yeah.
talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, even like, we're even going post-mortem, right, going through the design of the Powin Centipede system, and I think, you know, Veritex, who is the consultant, the third-party expert on behalf of the school board, said Powin is absolutely a tier 1 manufacturer. They've been in the space since its inception, and their product is extremely impressive, was a direct quote. So, you know, when we look at the technical specifications of these systems, there's, you know, unfortunately, you know, from a specification perspective, not a lot there for us to say that these systems are not safe. But understand your concern.
Yeah. Is there any state or federal oversight of how these are manufactured and deployed?
Yeah, so there are, UL they provide, you know, standards and certifications for all different consumer products. So there are a number of UL certifications that manufacturers have to pass at the product level in order to receive, you know, the UL certifications to install their systems, and that was a part of the filing. Powin, you know, has all those certifications.
I'm not an engineer, so I just want to make sure I understand this, right? You'd mentioned there was a product defect with water infiltration, but they were UL rated, right? So would that imply that they passed all of the requirements to be
They-
certified? But
They pass the UL's test.
Were
does
they-
that include the water infiltration preventions they might or should have had?
I'm not familiar with the specific test details and the parameters, but the system as a whole is tested for safety. So, you know, we can certainly come back to the board with details on what the UL 9540A testing includes, specifically for the product itself. Again, this is done at the product level. It's not done for every product that rolls off the
Right, so there's a
manufacturing line.
standard at the product level, but no real regulatory oversight on these pieces of equipment being deployed.
What regulatory oversight, like what?
Federal, state, you know, DEC, you name it, Department of Energy.
Yeah, there are product certifications, again, you know, from, that are provided by Underwriters Laboratory, which is common for electrical consumer products. And then, you know, obviously, we have a process that we go through with all of you, you know, where the systems are confirmed to be compliant with, you know, state and local codes.
Tom, were you trying to understand whether or not these units were individually inspected?
Well, one, yes, but also, is there any body who is making sure this is done correctly? Because it feels like protecting a unit from water that's going to live outside for decades would make sense.
I wasn't clear on what the answer to that first question was, is whether or not the units were individually inspected.
There is, so I was gonna go there, so there's the preliminary product certifications that are passed at the product level. And then, no different than, you know, many other products, there's factory acceptance testing done on units that roll off the manufacturing line. And those were done by Powin for these units, yet still, there was water infiltration after that factory acceptance testing was done.
So Powin does their own inspections?
They do their own factory acceptance testing.
What inspections does Convergent do to ensure the quality of the product?
Yeah, so we had, these systems were, where they were manufactured, we had a consultant and we had representatives from Convergent down at the Powin manufacturing facility for the factory acceptance testing. Now, as a buyer, we're not allowed into the facility to conduct the testing. You know, we're given the results, which, you know, is what we have to go off of.
You're given the results of the tests that they do themselves?
Correct.
And then you have to accept them? You're not performing your own inspections?
We don't perform factory, we do visual inspections, obviously, when the
Of
equipment
the
is
asset?
delivered.
Okay.
And we go through a commissioning process when we energize the systems, but we're not doing factory acceptance testing directly because we're not manufacturing the units.
Does the detailed report articulate how those defects would have been visible, like how they would have been detected?
So the process we're in right now is that the root cause analysis is intended to identify the specific issue, the component of the system, and the next phase of this would be, what are the alternatives? What was done incorrectly? Was it a bad specification on that component? Was it a manufacturing defect? And what are the potential solutions for that? So that's the next phase of this process.
And what will Convergent be doing with that information moving forward?
So both, with Powin and all the third-party experts that have been a part of the root cause analysis thus far, we're gonna work together to basically have Powin provide their intended solution. And with that entire body, make a determination with a ton of additional testing and analysis, make a determination as to whether or not, we think it's acceptable.
So is Convergent going to be conducting their own independent review of the assets moving forward, or do you
With our
anticipate that you are
consultants.
going to be accepting their process moving forward?
No, with our third-party experts, we will be very, very involved in the testing, and the factory acceptance testing, the subsequent testing of whatever the modified solution is. We will be intimately involved in that moving forward.
So there'll be a follow-up report?
Yes, absolutely.
I had another question about moving forward. You talked about the resilience of the grid and the fact that these systems are there to support our residents because we're using more power than the grid can handle. And so I know O&R isn't here tonight, but I'm assuming that there's been, are they? You are, okay. What is the grid resilience strategy moving forward through, a resolution to all of this?
Well, certainly we'll serve the customers in this area of the territory. So customers will not be without energy. We're working on a backup solution at the moment, not having this battery system.
What kinds of backup solutions are being considered?
Yeah, so this is supporting the Wisner substation. And so we're working on a mobile substation that would be dispatched in the event of a failure of one of the two transformers at that station.
How quickly can the mobile substations be deployed?
That depends on what the failure is. So,
What are the circumstances under which you anticipate needing a mobile substation?
yeah, so that would be a peak day. So that would be your summer day where you're super hot, lots of humidity. There's about a dozen of those a year. This year we're fortunate there's only about 6 that we hit those timeframes. And those are worst case scenarios, so there's a few hours where if one of those 2 banks failed in that substation and we didn't have the battery system online, we'd have to look to a backup support and we'd lose a number of customers for a small period of time.
Is it O&R's position that the battery systems are the long-term solution to the grid resilience?
It's a good question. So the battery solution is a project that's called a non-wire alternative project. So as opposed to rebuilding a substation, we were challenged by the state to pursue alternatives to serve the areas. And so an alternative here is this battery solution. So this battery solution will allow us to defer the substation for a period of 5 years, at which point then we will have to seek out other alternatives. Of course, it all depends on the size of the amount of energy needed to serve the area. So a lot of what we do is constant forecasting, as additional projects like hemp farms and things come online, these are giant energy needs. And so they constantly change, what we're having to serve.
What other alternatives do you deploy?
So this is the second non-wire alternative project that the utility has deployed. The first would be our Pomona battery system that is located in Rockland County.
Did O&R,
Excuse me, just one second.
Yeah,
Would you just
go
state your name for the record? So-
First name is Vincent, last name is Galligan.
Thank you, and my apologies for not asking that. I was excited about his presence.
did O&R pressure Convergent on the timeline to get units in the field and operational?
We had a timeline to have those units operational in order to suit the needs of our system. We had never put any sort of pressure on, Convergent to deliver any product that was gonna be, substandard to, delivering 100% safe product, right? So,
What was the timeline that you were operating on?
yep, so the delivery period was for this past summer. Fortunately, the weather really cooperated with us. We actually only hit our peak days in the September timeframe for that first week of school of all times. So,
Got it. So the gentleman from Convergent, I'm sorry, remind me your name, sir?
Frank.
Frank. So Frank, you had mentioned that O&R, in your prepared statement, I'm trying to recall this since I haven't read it yet, that O&R was pressuring you to get a unit installed sooner than later, which is the reason you moved from GE to Powin, right? It seems like at O&R, that pressure wasn't necessarily there.
Yeah, I'd say pressuring us, right? So these, as Vinny noted, these solutions have a timeline, right? Vinny and his team at O&R are forecasting load growth, and they have a schedule for, incorporating or implementing a solution to maintain reliability, and that is tied to load and time. So we had a date in our contract that we had to get the system online by, right? So that,
Your contract with O&R.
correct.
And Powin, how far in advance of installation did they manufacture the centipedes? Because I think what you're getting at is whether or not the centipedes were rushed. But that would presumably come out in the after-action report.
Yeah, when Powin internalizes the results of the RCA fully and looks at the subcomponents of the system and what specifically failed, I think the group will have a much better understanding as to, based on where that point of failure was, why that happened, right? Again, was it a manufacturing defect? Was it a spec defect?
And so,
That'll be the next phase.
yeah, so according to Powin's website, they began mass production of the Centipede model at the end of Q1 2022, with first deliveries scheduled to take place in Q2 2022, including 2,600 units being shipped to Australia, right? So when, the question is, were we really the first ones as a pilot? When did these units arrive in the village?
I don't have the exact dates of when the deliveries happened. It would have been early summer.
Of 2023?
The 20, was it 22? Yeah, I'd have to go back and check
Okay.
schedules, I'm not exactly sure.
Mr. Building Inspector, do you recall if that was brought in 2022?
I'm not sure when the actual systems were delivered.
I seem to recall it was
Arrived on site.
2022, right? So if they were really first deliveries scheduled to take place in Q2 2022, seems like we're the first.
Or part of the first wave, I think what you're getting
the
at.
centipede
Yeah.
system was delivered in February 2023.
February 2023.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Question for the board. Do we have any follow-up meetings scheduled with O&R to talk about the grid and the power resilience and what that strategy is going to be?
We can. I mean, we don't have anything set up now.
Yeah.
Please.
I don't have another question.
No? I'll open it up to the floor. I think Supervisor, do you have any questions that you might want to ask?
Yeah, I have one. There were a series of alarms at West Warwick for probably a month, right, prior to the incident. Do you have anything in your investigation that tells why that happened, and was it related?
Yeah, so going through the commissioning process for systems, you're on site, testing components, and early stage alarms are common in the startup phase. The RCA report doesn't specifically speak to those alarms and that, Mr. Sweeten, but based on the conversations that we've had and what those alarms were, there's no reason for us to believe that they were tied to the actual incident that occurred in July.
Okay, but how do we get confident that that's true? Do you, if you're, right, so you don't have the answer in the root cause analysis, is it gonna be addressed in the follow-up, I guess? would be-
Yeah, I mean, so when the alarms were happening, it was during during the commissioning phase. So we had people on site during that period. So I think what, you know, for us, what's important is that the root cause analysis specifically has identified what the cause of the fire was. And, you know, the resultant process that we're gonna move forward with is gonna be to focus on, you know, that product-related failure. So, you know, again, there are a number of alarms, supervisory alarms, not to get too technical, but just startup-related alarms that aren't fire-related, that have to get worked through, you know, in a typical startup process. So again, you know, in the analysis that was done, there's nothing that leads us to believe that those alarms specifically were an early indication of this problem. So yeah, I think that's the right
Okay,
case.
so then the second question, I guess, would be, so you don't know exactly how the water infiltrated, right? At this point, you just know that it was water caused, right? So
The RC
follow-up report is gonna tell you how the water got in?
Yes, so we know exactly, the RCA has identified exactly where in the units that the water infiltrated. The next question will be why, right? Was it something related to the manufacturing process for, you know, kind of one bunch of these units, or is it more product related, you know, a specification of caulk or some type of sealant or gasketing, right? That's what the next phase of this process will tell us.
And then my last question is, will your follow-up report try to understand why the fire suppression system worked in West Warwick 3 and not in 2?
Yes, I think, you know, as we're looking at making these product-related enhancements and forcing the manufacturers to do these things, there's the water infiltration itself, you know, there's the question around the fire suppressant inside of the container and why there was a different result, you know, between West Warwick 2 and West Warwick 3, so those will be covered.
Thank you.
Very good.
I have I have a follow-on question that I forgot to ask. And do we have a full understanding of the size of a possible conflagration from these batteries in the air? Like, without it igniting something else, how large are we looking at? Like, do we have an understanding of that? Is that documented somewhere?
How large is what
A
the
possible
fire?
conflagration from the batteries. So do we understand like the full scale and magnitude of the risk of the batteries igniting?
Well, we know for certain why they ignited, which was water infiltration.
I mean, the consequences, like, so
How bad could it get?
how bad could it get? That's what,
Yeah.
so that we can
So-
understand for planning moving forward. Is that documented? Is that assessed? Is that available?
Yeah, so that'll certainly be, you know, one of the things that, you know, again, you know, silver lining of these situations, the fire didn't spread beyond the pad that the units were located on. We spent a lot of time up front spacing out the site, you know, clearances between segments for those specific reasons. So, you know, we feel confident that the result, what happened was not by chance, right? It was by design. So I do think we did see, you know, what the worst case scenario was for this system, especially at West Warwick 2, which was that entire lineup, right? The 7 units, all isolated on one pad with, you know, clearances and spacing around those units. So I think that's a good model.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. If there's a fire, you can't put it out, right? You have to let it go out on its own. What if it did expand beyond the pad?
There's nothing for it to expand. There's no combustible material outside of the pad. So it's not able to, which is why there are fundamental spacing requirements for how far away we are from adjacent structures, from other battery containers. If you put that large air gap in there, there's nothing, you know, for the fire to transfer across.
And is that in like, building code or?
No, it's part of the manufacturer's guidelines, and it's also, you know, providing that spacing is both for maintenance and operations, but also it's in the manufacturer's guidelines.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, because it doesn't seem the manufacturer's guidelines, at least from what I've seen, seem all that credible.
I
But
think the results are helpful. We saw what happened, over an extended period at West.
well, is there any authority, any building department, anything in the state or federal that says if you have these lithium battery systems, that there shouldn't be anything combustible within X number of feet? Or is that just the manufacturer Powin's own guidelines to
Yeah,
what
there-
they feel is right?
At this point in time, there are no state guidelines, the building code also doesn't speak to it.
Because have you been out there? There's a lot of trees around it.
Yeah, I
It's
was here the
adjacent
first
to
day.
it.
I
It's
was here
adjacent
the
to a
first day.
park,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of combustible
there.
things outside. So it's a good question,
Yeah, that's why
Carly,
I
in
wanna
terms
know
of
what
how bad
this
could
is.
it get?
Yeah.
If there's a fire you can't put out, and there are combustible things around it, you don't know what the minimum distance is, other than what the manufacturer says themselves.
Yeah, I'd like to see whatever documents that's based on, those decisions are based on, right? Like what studies, or at least understand what studies they did to
Sure.
determine that.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming tonight. I feel like this is to be the first of like multiple conversations, because we need to understand the after action report and what steps would be taken afterwards.
Yeah, we agree, and that's 100% the intent. This meeting is just to share the results of what happened. We anticipate subsequent follow-ups and meetings and correspondence to chart a path forward, so.
Well, thank you, Frank. I appreciate
Thank you.
you
Thank you for
coming
coming.
tonight. And Boris, did you have anything that you wanted to ask?
No, I've pretty much heard what I needed to hear.
Okay, and Sergeant, anything? Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. So we have another presentation. To you, Shirley.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thank
much. No, not at all.
Can I?
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Need to,
Okay. Do you need to,
flash drive or computer?
Computer would be good? Okay.
okay.
I bring my cheater glasses.
I'll use this lens. We have the same glasses.
I know.
I'm gonna go over here so I can see.
I'm gonna be squinting.
Move your chair over here.
No, I'm okay. It's long enough. You good, Raymond?
Yeah. Karen, if you just want to bring your computer over. Sure. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, it's good. I'm okay.
There are going to be a few things that are a little small. I'll try and explain it
Tom, can you see it? Okay.
I can see
the
it.
best I can.
Oh, I can move.
Yeah.
There we go.
So Karen, you haven't really met the board in person. I
Okay.
think the last time was a Zoom meeting.
Oh, the workshop?
The workshop.
No, I think I was here, but I don't know if everybody was
No,
here.
That was a different
just-
year, I
yeah,
think, 'cause
no,
I don't.
That was with Sadie and you and I, and so,
Yep.
So
so
let me do some introductions.
Sure, sounds good.
Karen Clark and of course you know Barry, and then John Fletcher from Barton LaJudas, Trustee Cheney, as you know, and Trustee Foster, Trustee McKnight, and Trustee Kalura.
Nice to meet everybody. So I think I'm just gonna start from the beginning, because I know a lot of you are maybe coming in a little bit new on this project, even though it's been going on for a little while. So if there's anything that you feel I'm spending too much time on, just let me gloss over. There's about 10 slides that kind of take you through the history of where we are and what we're doing and how we are getting to the finish line here. So we're gonna just go through the project initiation, the grants that were received along the way, grants and funding, the impacts of those, the evolution of the project, current costs, and then the schedule to complete it. I don't know if this was sent out, but I do have copies. It'll be on the screen too for everybody if
Yes.
you want to have.
Send them around.
I'm gonna do it running back. So is everyone familiar with the wastewater treatment plant? I know Barry is intimately familiar with the treatment plant, but if you're not, we have primary tanks, what's called rotating biological compactors, that is a mixed film treatment process. Secondary treatment plants, tertiary filters, which are a media bed that you guys have, kind of an older technology, certainly works, is at the end of its useful life. You've got disinfection and post-aeration. There is currently now a UV disinfection system, which was put in about 2 years ago, part of this first phase of this capital project. So that's what you have right now. So in 2018, we started assessing the wastewater treatment plant in terms of future service life, things that might need to be included for upcoming future limits for phosphorus and things like that. If you're not familiar with fixed film technologies, there's not a lot to do to them. They just kind of run. They chug along. You can't really make a lot of adjustments. It's hard to treat for ammonia and impossible to treat for phosphorus for those. And those are two of the constituents that were coming down from the DEC in terms of where the plant was going to have to go. So again, it was an older facility. We did an upgrade analysis based on we did about a $30,000 study to figure out where we wanted to take the plant going into the future. We decided we were going to do a grit removal system, converting the RBCs to sequencing batch reactors. If you're familiar with that, it's a one tank configuration. It's a smaller footprint than a conventional activated sludge and secondary clarifiers. Turning the current secondary tanks into equalization and putting tertiary disc filters inside of your existing building in one of the bays of the existing tertiary filters. There was a way that we could keep the plant running, use the RBCs, one clarifier, one bay in the tertiary filters while the rest was built, and then sequence on to the next phase. We had a few other things at the time. We knew we wanted to do a little bit of SCADA. Didn't really have a clear plan for that. We did have some budget estimates and things like that. At the time we did this, because it was such a preliminary number, we had a 25% contingency, and you're going to see that number as we go along, as how we advance and what has happened to that amount. The reason we did 25% was you really don't know a lot of things at a $30,000 study. You don't do the geotech investigations, you didn't do any of the groundwater, the electrical wasn't investigated, and then any other requests that might come up from the treatment plant operators or builders along the way.
What level of design is the preliminary engineering report? Is that 15%, 30%?
It's a report, there's no
So
design
it's just-
plans. Yep.
Have you found that 25% contingency is adequate for preliminary engineering reports?
We usually use 20 to 30, but yes. Yep. Do you have a different thought?
I just would have thought it was higher.
Well, no, I mean, all of those things that are on there, we did get quotes. We weren't just, I don't want to say we weren't just guessing, so we work with manufacturers, we get quotes. We do a lot of treatment plants as a company, so we're pretty familiar with concrete tank construction and things like that. So there's a level of resources that we use to pull those together. But again, each one of the process equipment pieces, which are probably 30 to 40% of the total cost had detailed equipment quotes from manufacturers.
And that was, it was escalated through the schedule that you expected for implementation as well, or no?
Well, that would be what we think, yes, at the end. So that 25% would slowly get used as the project evolved, and so that would also include inflation over time. Yep.
My understanding is the design was going to be completed in 2022.
It was.
The design was completed,
No, it was intended to be.
but it hasn't started yet.
Oh, it is, it's underway. It's,
I'm sorry, maybe I misheard. I thought you said it wasn't,
No, just
No.
in 2018.
In
I was asking
2018.
questions
The
about the report
preliminary,
in
yeah.
2018.
I see, okay.
oh, in 2018, it was a $27,000 study. That was all that was done in 2018. So the next step was we went,
Could I just interject?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That study is like the first step in terms of EFC funding as well.
correct.
And I read the preliminary engineering report.
Okay.
I was just trying to get a sense of where we are today. Or are you getting there?
Compared to the 2018?
Where you are in terms of design and construction?
Oh, well, we'll get there, but we had, in February of 2021, we basically had a set of drawings, about 67, like process drawings, so those were all done. It might make a little bit more sense if I get to where the
Okay,
hurdles were
I'll
as
wait.
to why things stopped. So, once that report was done, we then started applying for WQIP grants, WIA grants, Water Infrastructure Act, something like that, in the fall of 2018 into the following year. So the good news was in probably mid-2019, you were awarded a WIA grant, so we were thrilled with that. We didn't get the WQIP, but that's how the cards fell. So, going into it, I don't think we really knew that the village was gonna qualify for much. We were hoping that you guys were. So that was really the first funding avenue that you guys have had for the treatment plant so far. So the trick is, you guys have always been very fiscally aware and paid for your projects over very, very short periods of time. Could do things in your own mechanism in terms of, MWB requirements, whether they were required or not. That's not the case when you go with Environmental Facilities Corporation. They have very strict rules in terms of what needs to be done. So with just getting the grant, which was the first step in the summer of 19, there was a 30% requirement for MWB participation on the grant amount only, which would be about $918,000. Usually that money is used for the construction contractors, and it's a lot easier for them to do that because they're buying multi-million dollars of pieces of equipment from different suppliers. So that was great, but the hurdle now was we needed to redo the PER because we wanted to add in Orchard Street Pump Station and also try to recoup the UV project that was already underway. So there was a couple iterations and back and forth with EFC, specifically with Orchard Street, and trying to get that project approved from a PER standpoint. It went on for quite a while, unfortunately, during COVID. They not necessarily accessible, a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of non-communication, unfortunately. We would get an email, and then we wouldn't hear back for months at a time. You were very well aware of the situations with our MWB plans and the people we were dealing with. We did go through a few of them, a couple different people from the agency. That didn't help either. But I guess to just kind of boil that all down, we redid the PER, we submitted it to EFC to get approval. We were just about at the end point with that, but the Orchard Street Pump Station did not include the MWBE or the EFC requirements in their construction contract. So that turned into be the next hurdle. We started working with your other firm, trying to help them negotiate with the contractor to try and add those requirements in. It increased the cost so much that it really wasn't beneficial anymore. So we backtracked, we took that out, and we took it out of the report and moved on from EFC. And in March,
Who was the other firm were you
um,
referring to?
Engineering Properties.
Oh, okay, thank you.
yep. So we retracted that and switched and fixed the report in March of 2021. All the time, I guess more good news came in. If you're familiar with the intended use plan with EFC, there's deadlines and they come out in October of each year, and you guys had actually gotten above the funding line. Again, something that probably hadn't happened before from a point standpoint, which was good, but now they changed the MWBE goals again. So instead of being 30% on just the grant, it's 23% on the whole project. So it goes to $2.8 million. Now, BNL was already underway, the other firm was already underway, their project was already out to bid. So there was a lot of hurdles that we tried to get through to try and make all that work out. And it sounds like excuses, and it's not. It's just trying to explain the process of how this all came about. The UV contractor, we did include the right requirements. They actually met the goals. The representative that we had decided she did not want to approve it, even though they'd approved like 4 others of the same situation in other regions. In her region, she was rejecting that. And we went through probably 6 months of back and forth with her until I had to get a letter saying these other 4 locations got approved by EFC and other portions of the state. And then the next day, we pretty much had approval on that issue. So I can't explain why it happened. It just, people have
So basically, we went from a situation where you as our consultant were looking to bring in MWBE subcontractors to an amount of just under $1 million to it taking it up to $2.8 million.
2.8 for the project as a whole. And that would be everybody. That would be including the UV contractor, it would be the general and electrical contractors that are gonna be working on your project. But they don't look at it just from the grant perspective. If we had just stuck with the EFC grant, that whole 918 could have been put on the contractor. They now look at each individual contract. So they looked at your other engineering firm, they looked at BNL, they looked at the UV construction general contractor, the UV construction electrical contractor. Each one of those firms had to meet those goals, or else you would either wouldn't get the funding, or we would have to keep going back and going around on the waivers, which is basically what we had to do.
Can you, so item number 5 there, can you explain what, I didn't quite understand what happened with the general contractor? Were they refusing to meet the goals on their contract, or?
Not refusing, but we're asking an exorbitant amount of money to include the requirements.
The change order,
Right.
significant change order.
So it was determined that it was not beneficial.
So
for
we
the
stuck with the same general contractor?
No, we don't have a contractor for, so you guys.
That
there
was
a
in place already.
Yes,
That was work that was
underway.
already underway. So it had preceded the grants.
Okay.
And we were trying to work it so that we could get
loan money.
reimbursement for it.
Right.
But in the end, it just didn't work out.
Exactly. So sorry if I am intertwining general contractors. So there was one for the pump station screening project. There was an electrical and general contractor for the UV project. There will be an electrical general contractor for your upcoming wastewater treatment plant.
So 3 general contractors.
3 general contractors.
And the one with, that one
With
was,
UV.
the work was already underway by the time we got the CWSRF funding, and then they refused to, we were having difficulty with them playing ball with the new requirements.
They didn't refuse to do it, they just said, if this is what you want us to do to meet the, so they had already subbed out the work that they were gonna sub out, so they would have had to have changed their subcontracts with the people that they had agreed to, and that's just part of the game, unfortunately, with the MWB programs. Those firms typically do charge more than a regular firm. So, again, the fall of 2019, they indicated we were above the funding limit and asked us to submit a funding application. That was done in January of 2020. Believe it or not, the final approval was in May of 2023. The approval ties into the PER, it ties into BNL's MWBE plan, the general and electrical contractors for the UV, and initially the contractor for the screening.
So there was a 3-year gap between submitting the application in January of 2020 and the approval in May.
Correct?
And that was an administrative issue on behalf of the state?
That would be my interpretation, yes. There were, all of it was resubmission after resubmission of information at their request.
Were they clear about the information that they needed up front so that we could have received approval earlier?
I don't feel they were clear. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that at all based on her emails, but no.
Well, maybe to put it in a different perspective, we were asked to submit, and we submitted. And then we were asked to submit again, and we submitted. And so we did everything within our power to give them the answers that they requested, but it just seemed that there were either little nuances or things that they challenged and questioned that caused additional submittals or resubmittals.
And two different MWBE coordinators, so it shifts
They
within the middle.
switched in the middle. Their
And you would think
coordinators.
it would be standardized, but it's not. So just,
Well, let me just say, Karen, I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, all the bullets on the right are the reasons for 2A going to 2B for the 3-year window. I mean, we described all those items, right? The resubmission of
Right.
a couple of PERs, the problems with the MWBE on the Orchard Street. General contractor, I mean, so when you're looking for, all right, what are the reasons for all the back and forth? Those are primarily all the reasons
Right.
going back and forth on all that information between those dates, if I'm not mistaken.
correct. And they work in a very sequential matter, so their first thing that they want to do is approve the PER. So our back and forth on the PER with adding Orchard Street, taking Orchard Street out, probably did not help the situation. We thought it was the right thing to do at the time, to be able for you guys to long-term finance with that program, but, and then once that goes, and then it goes into the finance group, and then they ask the treasurer for a whole bunch of information, and once that hurdle is done, then they go into the MWBE. And again, there's a few little bullets, again, minor, it was just, every time we submitted something, there was always something else. Specifically, like the geo firm that we had hired to do the work, when we gave the village the proposal in, I think, 2020, they were a certified WBE firm. By the time they got to the work the next year, they got purchased, they were no longer a WBE firm anymore, so they got rejected by the time the EFC woman looked at it a year later. So I know it sounds very convoluted, but that's kind of the process of how it all came about. So we had to do another waiver and another submission.
Barton and LaJudas works on a lot of projects throughout the country. So have you ever dealt with something like this prior? I mean, is this become the new world
Unfortunately,
order?
I'd hate to say it's the new norm, but I think since COVID, it is the new norm. They were never necessarily a quick agency, such that you would get like approval in 3 months, but it would be 6 to 9, not 2.5.
I think it's COVID, I think some of it is their own labor shortage, not just, we talk about labor shortages throughout, manufacturing and labor to build things. I think they have their own labor shortage and challenges. In this meantime, there's been all the discussion at the federal level about all the dollars coming down. It's essentially going to those same agencies to then direct and administer that much more money
Yep.
and that much more program. And I think it's caused some very significant delays. And that's what we've really seen from
Yeah.
about the middle of 2021 on,
Yep.
is some significant delays in process.
Across the board.
Well, every, yeah. No, you're not alone, unfortunately. So
I'm
finally.
sorry, do you pick the MWBE or does the contractor pick which firm?
So like for us, we pick, or we have to go out and solicit MWBEs for things that we don't do, which would be like survey work, geotechnical work. We do electrical work in-house, but we have to sub it out to meet goals, so there's other firms that we do have to use that we could normally just do it in-house and control things possibly a little bit more, but we have to hire certain people.
So you picked one and there was a labor shortage and they raised the price accordingly and then you switched to another one? Did I get that right?
Nope,
I'm just trying to
but
summarize.
The money part was not on ours, the money piece was on the general construction contract for Orchard Street. I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but.
Oh, the general contractor who then would sub it out to MWBE.
Right, so they had started down the construction on Orchard Street without the or without any of the EFC information. We tried to go back and get that basically through a change order, inserted into their contract, but there's requirements that they then had to meet. So let's say they were gonna use subcontractor A, who was not a M or a WBE. In order to meet those goals, they now need to use contractor B. Contractor B charges $100,000 more than contractor A. That's what they came back with, their analysis of what they needed to make that work.
And maybe a broader overview to your question, each one of the independent contractors that we have, Barton and LaJudas, the Songer who did the UV, the general contractor who has not been selected yet because we haven't bid that, they have their own 23% goal.
Right.
And so the contract that will be written in the specifications and in the specifications for the general and electrical contractors will require them to come up with a plan and provide that to us that demonstrates that they are able to meet the 23% goal.
Okay, thanks, that helps.
Yeah.
So the delays were just, it seems like a combination of different parties not being on the same page?
To some degree self-imposed relative to wanting to get the Orchard Street Pump Station included in the funding award.
Yeah.
And so that, we tried to do that. That took a little time and decided in the end that, we made that decision in the end that we just didn't want to continue to pursue it because it was going to really cost us more. I forget what the numbers were, but the change order that the contractor was requesting was almost as much as what we were going to be getting in the grant.
Yeah, exactly. Actually more than the grant, so you really would have been showing in, you would have been showing into the,
Got it, okay.
the savings from the interest rates.
Well,
and
thank
things
you
like
for
that. Yeah.
explaining.
No, it's a challenging funding scenario, so. I mean, the biggest thing was, the first part, it was just 30% on the construction, would have been 900,000. Switching it made it be 2.9 amongst everybody to try and meet that goal. It's a big number. And what you do if you can't is get waivers, and that's basically, it was the waiver process is what was going back and forth with these iterations with this agency.
I see.
Can I ask a stupid question? Because this schedule is all about finalizing the design and then the construction, but the general contractors do construction, right? So we hired them before we're doing
No,
activity, or
there's
we
three
had
different construction projects.
Okay, okay.
2 are done.
Okay,
And
so this is the final
future-
one.
This is
Okay.
the final big one.
But
Thank
UV,
you.
Orchard Street Pump Station,
Are
and this is the
finished.
third.
This is the main wastewater treatment plant project, correct?
Yeah. I think we would be better equipped to ask questions if this was like a timeline, or by project, because it
I could not
just.
figure out how to do that, to be honest with you, because the next slide, so the next things we were doing simultaneously while we're waiting for the funding side of this is, I apologize. So this is when we had to do the 2021 PER revision. So we added in, it's really hard to see, the UV project and the Orchard Street Pump Station at the bottom. The total was 12.25. That's what we applied to New York State EFC for the loans. And these are some of the things that came along the way. So the previous contingency was 25% based on the $30,000 study. Now we're starting the design, we're getting more formalized. Again, like I said, we added in Orchard Street. At the time, we didn't know there wasn't a pump station for your bathrooms at the wastewater treatment plant. It just went to a septic tank and they hauled up to the front end of the plant. And we needed a pump station for the grit system, so that was something that had to get added in. Again, these are just small things, but they started trickling away at the contingency, and that's kind of what it's there for. When you first put it in at 25% based on the study, you don't know all of these small little things. There were a couple additions, like the plant water pump was a request, and a smart request from the staff to recycle water from the back end of the plant into the belt filter press, so we don't have to use potable water for that process. So it's smart, but it wasn't part of the 2018 study. So again, $120,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you get a couple of these, it does chip away. We had started to look at the electrical, and based on the work that we had done on the UV, we'd had to do transformers for the UV because you have 208 power and a lot of the larger equipment needs 480. We kind of thought at the time we'd be able to continue on with that for the main treatment plant process, but I'll get to that in a second, but unfortunately that is not the case. We do have to upgrade the electrical service now. At the time, the concrete tank costs were still good. The SBR costs had increased a little bit between 2018, 2021, again, $80,000. Didn't feel that that was that crazy, but you add all these things up, we reduced the contingency from 2.3 down to 1.29 in 2021.
I have a question. Has there been any consideration to, so I see I see the vouchers that we signed to haul away the metric tons of residuals,
The biosolids, yep.
right? Biosolids, thanks. That's a much better way to put it. Has there been any consideration to converting that, really leveraging the methane gas and converting it to electricity and having some sort of plant there to offset the energy consumption? Because my assumption is, I shouldn't assume, I'd like to ask you this. Is the new wastewater treatment plant going to consume more electricity than the current? If so, how much? And can that be offset through harnessing methane gas conversion to electricity? Sorry, that's like a 5-part
No, I
question.
can look up the report. It is gonna use more than the RBCs, but there was no choice going forward. The RBCs will not meet your ammonia and your phosphorus limits going forward. In the first report, we analyzed SBRs, MBBRs, and membrane bioreactors. The SBR was the most cost-effective as well as the most energy efficient of those three processes. But it will be using more than you are right now, because right now you just have 16 RBCs that just kind of like have motors and they chug along. We're gonna have to have new blowers for the activated sludge process. Now, to answer your second question, you do not have anaerobic digesters at this facility. You have an aerobic system, and that's what we're going to be continuing on in the future. We do a lot of anaerobic digestion complexes, and you would be astounded at the cost. You did
So we have an aerobic process, but that would require anaerobic digesters, which is
And basically, when
different
you run the
technologies.
cost-benefit analysis for the size plant you
Correct.
have, it doesn't, the numbers don't work out.
right. We've seen like 3.5 MGD is really where we start to try and look at anaerobic digestion, not for 1 MGD facilities. You don't have, not to scare you, but we did a 3.5 MGD anaerobic digestion conversion project. That was $33 million. I mean, it's significant. Those digestion complexes, you'd have, I don't even think we'd have the footprint, but let's just say we did, you'd have a primary and a secondary anaerobic digestion, you'd have a gas holder, you'd have a mixing tank system. And usually where they do become a little bit more cost competitive is when you can take an outside waste, like a high strength waste, but that would mean truck traffic going through that neighborhood to that wastewater treatment plant. And I don't think that's really something that the village would
So
want to
our
consider.
capacity, we're 1 MGD.
You're 1 MGD now, we're going to 1.25, correct. Mostly, a couple of things came into that. The backwash water from the water filtration plant now goes to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's 80 to 100,000 gallons a day of capacity that took up. So you had borderline, prior to that, I know we're working on I&I, we've been making some headway in those locations, but you had significant exceedances from a 30-day flow average when you're at 1 MGD.
I&I is inflow and infiltration, it's coming from the rain and
The
the
sewer
Right.
system.
sewer
So
system.
Carly, we were talking about upcoming potential funding methods to get a 30% rebate for alternative
Elective pay, yeah.
electric pay, yeah. So are you familiar with that in terms of offsetting those costs? All right, so you mentioned 3.5 MGD. I don't even know.
Well,
what-
no, that, yeah.
It's 33 million or
I was just
something.
trying to give you an idea.
Right,
of what
and that is a scary
digester-
number, yes, you're right. But 1, presumably would that be I don't know, a third of that?
No, unfortunately, because you need the infrastructure, so that's why we're saying normally it's 3 MGD, maybe even like 5 MGD and above is really
It's kind of the
where-
minimum? for
Where
doing
these
that? Okay.
plants are doing them, yeah. We've done them in Oneida and Rome. Rome's like 9 MGD, they're all like much
Okay.
larger facilities.
All right.
They're usually located near highways so that they can take the truck traffic for the high strength
So the
waste.
sludge is gonna be hauled away, so
Same as
moving
you do
forward.
right now, yep.
And it's,
really,
is it being dewatered?
Yes, you have belt filter presses that are not that old. 2000
Where is it being hauled to?
Pennsylvania, because you don't have digested sludge.
so
Right now, Pennsylvania.
Right now, Pennsylvania. That's my understanding, or at least it was the last time I talked to you.
I believe that's the case. So we're gonna have to make very minimal changes to that end of the plant. In other words, the digester that we have now is going to be used for the new plant and also the belt filter press, that whole process, correct?
The belt filter press is staying the same. I can get back to this one if we end up having to. So that's the new plant on top of your existing plant. So your primary tanks are gonna be converted to aerobic sludge holding tanks. So that might be what you're speaking about,
Okay.
Barry. But the belt filter press, the dewatering conveyors, all of that is in pretty good shape. The only thing we're doing in the sludge processing building really is the water piping for the plant water to eliminate using potable water for the spray system.
So we're gonna abandon our dome?
Nope, that's
No,
still gonna,
okay.
so.
That's
the-
part of it?
Yep, the
So
aerobic
you'll
sludge.
pump from the holding tanks to there, or?
Correct, so it'll be the same, so, yes, so you've got pumps inside your building right now that transfer the sludge. So right now, these are primary sludge tanks at the bottom. So you have a mix of primary and waste sludge that come to those tanks with your current process, and that's where your sludge is taken out of through pumps in here that goes to that small tank just prior to your belt filter press. So we're gonna be maintaining the same overall process, except this is just gonna be waste sludge in those tanks.
How often is the sludge hauled away?
They don't press every day. I think it depends, 3 days a week they're doing right now, something along those lines, so,
Maybe weekly?
yeah, that's kind of their goal, they wanna,
Trying to remember.
they don't want it to sit there, so they would run it
Yeah.
3 days in a row, and then the dumpster will go away as soon as it's full.
Can I circle back to the thread I was getting at
Sure.
earlier? What sort of energy savings methods have been explored to be worked into this project? Or are there any ideas that you haven't kind of designed or thought through that could be explored?
But we always do, like VFDs for blowers, that's a given, VFDs for pumps, so that they operate at the most opportune point. There's.
But that's variable?
Oh,
fan-
I'm so
drive.
sorry,
Yeah.
variable frequency drive, so that'll ramp up the pumps and the blowers to meet the need. There's a dissolved oxygen system within the SBR, so we wanna maintain a certain level of oxygen.
Okay.
So if too much is going in, it tells it to stop and it ramps down the blowers to reduce the energy. The tertiary disc filters are probably the most energy efficient technology out there. Once it's pumped through, it's a passive, it's got a very small motor, much less energy intensive than your backwash and that traveling bridge. But as a whole, because of the blowers, it is more energy intensive than the SBRs, or RBCs, I'm sorry. I can get the exact numbers, I did bring the original report if you want me to go through that.
Oh, no, not tonight, but. Thank you.
Unfortunately, meet the more environmental stringent concerns. RBC is old technology, but it was less energy intensive. So to meet today's environmental considerations for discharge of wastewater, we're going to a more up-to-date technology, it takes more energy.
Right.
So,
Oh,
so how do other municipalities reconcile this? Because the state is imposing more stringent guidelines on wastewater treatment and, effluent that's released. The state's also imposing more guidelines on energy efficiency. Where do these two things meet, and what are other municipalities doing to find a reasonable option that doesn't use as much energy, that's a little bit more cost effective?
I'm not sure I know exactly.
Well, I mean, what I would say it starts with
Should I
the
repeat?
size of the plant, where you're discharging your, where the plant discharges to. Does the treated discharge go to an intermittent stream? Does it go to the Hudson River, right? Like what size stream is one area that will really dictate in the level of treatment that's required? There's no doubt, some of it is through the funding they're making available, how cost competitive it will then be to use the appropriate treatment technology to meet the limits needed So you don't kill the fish.
I
and
just,
have problems
right.
downstream.
I just think it's important to ask these questions now because we're gonna be stuck with this system for decades.
My perspective is DEC is talking out of both sides of its mouth. They're basically saying, this is what you have to do to meet your speedies permit, do it. And then they're also, in another vein, saying, you know, you have to save energy, you have to do things more energy efficient. And the two don't often meet, and that's an issue. But that doesn't stand in the way of us being able to do things either now, but it might be a little late in the game, or down the road relative to other means by which we can create passive energy
Right.
systems within the property.
So that's what I'm getting at. Are we then left with the solution of creating outside of this whole design how to offset that cost? Or are there opportunities to integrate into the design some of these energy savings measures now before it's constructed?
On top of like the VFDs and the, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
And the
like,
Yeah.
we can't do biogas, it sounds like, because we're not gonna have a digester system, you know, so that would have been a thing, but, you know, if it was a much bigger facility.
Correct.
And again, we're up against our funding platform. We know what we're getting. We know what the project costs are going to be. Those two were aligned. And anything more that we try and do, we're not going to get funding for. However, that doesn't say that we can't look down the road when this gets built or while it's getting built to find funding mechanisms whereby we would get funding support from the state that would allow us to do things that
To meet their own
can be
guidelines.
integrated
Yeah.
into the facilities that we're creating.
Well,
Like
like, I think
solar,
one
for
thing that's
example, would
happened
be a
more recent-
separate thing.
Right.
It would be a separate thing that we would do that wouldn't be integrated into this design.
Yeah.
Maybe not integrated in the design, it could be integrated eventually in the facility. I mean, solar's become much more on a regional basis. I mean, it used to be you did solar specific at a location to offset the energy costs there. I mean, now it's much more, you know, can you do it elsewhere in the grid, and they just look at it as a whole net. So you can look at a whole solar program, if you will. But it's much more regional, you know, regional at the village level than a very site-specific
Okay,
location.
yeah.
I have a question about capacity. So you mentioned 1.25 MGD, but then there's 800,000 gallons a day that are being taken up by something else.
No, 80.
80 to 100,000
80 to 100 is the
gallons
water
a day
treatment
for the
plant.
water.
Oh, got it,
The
okay.
backwash from the
So,
water plant.
do we understand how much more population this, like, capacity is
I should have
would
printed out the
enable
whole
us
report,
to?
but I do.
Yeah.
I don't have it with me, but yes, there was predictions of population increase and what went along with
Over
And
what
And then I think
period?
the intent
30
is,
years would have been the planning period.
you look at a 30-year demographic period, you try to do the projection out, you try to take an idea of any localized what's happened at the planning board or regional for industry that may go in. And then really the thought after that is if you have any level of significant I&I, okay, so in that 10, you say a 10-year period, the first third of that, how much, you know, do we think we can get back in I&I?
How can we tighten?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and tighten it up to provide you capacity.
Okay.
Not sure I need to go through this too much, but basically just some other things that took some time with the state agencies. So as soon as we started down the path of knowing you guys were gonna have funding, you were gonna have a way to construct your project, we started on the new Speedies discharge permit. That got submitted in January of 2020. I think it was the 6th, if I remember correctly. We had numerous discussions via Zoom with DEC during COVID, just to keep that moving. They made some slight changes to the ammonia limits, but it wasn't really an impact on what we had planned in the 2018. We knew the ammonia limits were coming and were gonna be changing, so they tweaked them by like 0.2 milligrams per liter, which was really nothing in the big picture of it. But I guess my point of this is their final permit didn't arrive until July 5th of 2022. So a year, 2.5 years it took to get that Speedies permit. Even if we didn't have the funding hurdles, we could not have gone out to bid before that permit was in hand. EFC would not move forward with releasing any money until that permit was secured. So that was another piece of pie. with EFC. But we continued on, like I said, we did the geotech, wetland surveys, survey all the things that we could do. We did a 60% design plans were prepared in March of 2021. And that's basically around the time where, as a team, we decided to kind of pause the project. We were having the hurdles with EFC. There was pretty much between the UV project, the screening project, and the engineering cost to date, because there was no ban. We were hoping to be in the short-term loan with EFC by that time. We had kind of exhausted the amount of money that could have been expended at the time, so.
Maybe you could explain the short-term loan?
Oh, sure. So, as soon as they give approval, they give you 3 years of short-term loan money at 0%. So it's fantastic. So you don't have to do bans and pay interest. It's fantastic. You can get into the program a little bit quicker than where we are. We're at that point now. They finally, like I said, May 15th, everything got approved. They finally released your first money in June, which was paying you back for everything that you have paid on the Orchard Street, the UV project, and all the engineering fees to date. So you kind of recouped your coffers there a little bit from past funds that you've basically, used your reserve money to do that, so.
So from the village's standpoint, we were pretty much, from a cash flow basis, tapped out where we were prior to, saying, go ahead and move the design forward.
Right.
It seems like this kind of an update would be helpful more often, because that's a big gap for the whole village board to understand what's going on with the project.
We've had a couple updates here and there, but
But you're right, we should consider having more fluid.
whatever you.
Not of the entire board, I mean,
Right.
yeah, so, and I think
But we
that's
did meet-
what Carly is
Right.
saying.
The first Friday of every month, we have a team meeting. I'm happy to include anybody that wants to listen ad nauseam on some of the decisions that we make, but that's something that we always do. And we've been talking about schedule and issues with EFC and construction costs, and I'm gonna get into that piece a little bit more, depending on how much more patience you have with this and what kind of questions you have. But
Well, does the presentation get into project management processes moving forward, like reporting and things like that?
not specifically.
Okay.
Other than, like I said, we have monthly meetings with the village team, which is your operations staff, a representative from the board and the mayor.
We can have a discussion on the topic. You wanna- you
Sure,
wanna
yeah,
finish
after,
up?
I'll let you do
Yeah.
the presentation.
Because, I mean, we can do that without you having to come all the way here, obviously.
Yes, that's one of the things that, when we had a recent discussion about some things, that really was like, we should be here some of the time, because the in-person is really, really good. But there's also some level of update that if it's done virtually and you have the screen here, can be done pretty easily.
Mhm. Or like if those monthly updates are coming through, then they can be shared to the whole board for our, as part of our package.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so where we were in like March or spring of 2021, like I said, funding was pretty much exhausted. The next major step was for us to, in order for us to progress design, would be to hire our WBE electrical firm. But because we still didn't have MWE approval from EFC, it would have been a risk. It would have been a risk to B&L because we wouldn't have been able to pay the subcontractor, and it could have been a risk to the village if for some reason they disallowed that firm, similar to some of the other situations we had with the geotech firm and things prior to that. So again, as a team, we kind of decided to just wait until we could get through the financing aspects of it. So, and again, not belaboring it, but we did carry some money for about 6 months as we were kind of going through this. So we knew the issues were not the village's fault. We didn't really feel it was B&L's fault. It was just an issue we were dealing with the funding agencies. So we just decided to carry those fees to keep the project moving.
It's a little bit of a struggle with short term right now, because as you mentioned, the dichotomy between energy efficiency and meeting environmental, it's the same here. They really aren't looking for communities to go take bans out and to take on the costs associated with bans, and they really encourage the short term, especially because it's 0%. It's like building a house. When you build a house, the short term financing is your bridge loan that you're paying the contractor while you build it. Then when you close, you go to your long term. It's the same exact concept.
Yeah.
They've really struggled timing wise being able to get things to short term financing. This isn't the only project taking, a year and a half to 2 years. Well, I mean, how do you work on it, have a year and a half to 2 years, and not have access to the money, but then what do you do? You know what I mean? So,
How much did BNL carry?
I don't know, I mean, we weren't working full-time, like in March, the invoices and when we had the whole team were probably $40,000 a month, and that's kind of why we stopped, because we knew we had expended what you guys could do. The other time was really just the work on maybe some environmental things, questions with EFC, so a few $1,000s a month, but it wasn't the 40, we couldn't carry that
Right.
for forever, so.
And the dependency there is waiting for EFC financing to come through. Is
Right,
that
I think if we had known in 2020 that the short-term loan wasn't gonna happen in the normal time frame, we may have made a different decision to suggest to your advisor to get a ban, because that's what other communities have had to do. We're working with a county that's trying to build upgrade at a 44 MGD plant. It's a $50 million project, and they're in the same boat. They should have been in short-term financing, and it's not even an MWBE issue. It is questions with their county finances. Like, it's just every little entity within EFC has their own little box, and each person deals with their own little box without necessarily communicating with every other box. So it's a step process, so.
Is it still paused?
Ours is not, nope.
Oh, we're just giving the timeline.
Yes,
Just
I was
part
just
of that.
the history of how it was going. Which am I going?
It's like a whole presentation.
So, okay, so here's where we are. So, the fundings came in June of this year. So well, actually, we knew in May, we had gotten the waiver approvals, so we knew, once that happens, EFC is quick-ish, if you want to say. So within a month, we knew the money was going to be coming. So we went to our subcontractor, Jade Stone, electrical engineering firm, and said, okay, we've got the authorization, we can move forward. So that's where we started in May of this year to get them scheduled and to get them going. They started on their piece of the pie. I know it sounds like a long time, 2 months between start and finish, but nobody is necessarily just sitting around waiting for work. So we got into their schedule. We got on site in the middle of July with them, and they are actively working on it with a target of November 15th of this year for everybody to be done.
So they increased the price of a concrete tank by $1 million?
They did.
Is the $750,000 enough contingency to get us through
Well, we
2025?
went through a few of these iterations today, keeping a percentage. The percentage makes it be 1.6 million there, which I don't think we're really in that range. That would have made a total increase of, I forget what the original number was, very like 2.3, kind of a large number to absorb at this moment. So we reduced the contingency, but at this point we've gone through and updated all the quotes for the good or the bad. The precast concrete tank quotes, that's the first one there. That's their current quote, knowing that this is like a spring of 2024 construction project. So that's their quote to us, or quote estimate to us. And then just
That's
that,
not the bid price.
No.
That's just an estimate.
that's their budget estimate to engineers, and then they will give prices to the general contractor. Like I mentioned, the electrical firm started in July. Just unfortunately Thursday is when we found out that they determined they cannot put in numerous transformers to keep the existing service, the 208 volt service, in play going forward with the blowers and things like that. So we do have to do a new service to the facility. The rest of your processes will stay 208. Everything that's new will be 480 volt. But that increased the cost from about $400,000. Again, they're kind of roughing it in at $1 million, so a $600,000 increase. And there's other things associated with that, not just the service, just electrical panels in general are a lot more expensive than they were in 2019.
when you look at a lot of the equipment we're talking about since we started this, we've really seen in COVID and in the supply chain, electrical has really shot up. When you look at
Yeah.
transformers, you look at the wiring for it, you look at control panels, that is an item that has went up.
So did the project total increase by 1.35 million, or did the contingency reduce by that amount to 750?
Well,
Yeah.
so we've reduced the contingency because we're further along in the design, but the cost between the concrete tanks, electrical services, some of the equipment, keeping in the plant water pump. It's another 1.3 on top of where we thought we were.
So then what's the, Deputy Mayor, what's the longer term impact to, how we finance this, right? Because we had a ban, we just be paying it off longer now?
There's no,
Well.
Or we've converted the ban?
We'll have to figure out how we're gonna go to the long-term financing, and yes, if we're needing to, fund a higher cost, it's gonna take longer for us to pay that off.
but in terms of EFC.
What was the estimate of the payoff? I think it was 15 years.
12 to
12
15,
to
somewhere
15
around
years,
in
right.
there, yeah, so.
Yeah, so you guys were being proactive with respect to that. A lot of places take the full 30 years to pay off their loans, but it's a smart way to go. To get it paid off, start building up your reserve fund for.
Well, this could add a few more years to that.
We had pierced the tax cap a number of years ago to begin to save about $500,000 a year. And as a result, we've banked, I'm trying to remember, because we just raised the amount we were allowed to around 3 or 4 million, somewhere in that range. So we should be adding about another $500,000 a year until we convert to the long-term financing. So we'll be reducing the total cost by the 3 million we're receiving in the grant and another 4 or so million that we have saved to date. So our financing, will be about 7 million, 6 or 7 million that we'll have to finance.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Based on the numbers we're seeing tonight.
Okay.
So it adds 3 years?
I don't know how many years it would add.
Yeah.
I guess you figure forever, so at
And we're not
paying
done.
it
I
off
mean,
at paying it off at $500,000 a year, just to pay off the of $7 million, just to
Just the
pay
principal,
off
yeah.
the principal would be 14 years.
Right,
So, and you've got interest in there.
right.
It's going to be pretty heavy in the first half
Few
of
years,
that.
yeah, okay.
So like you said, this is just a schedule of going forward. How do we get to the finish line? I could not figure out how to do a bar chart with all of those intricacies of everything that happened over those 3 years and the side shoots and all the stuff that happened. So I just figured I'd start with May 15th, which is when EFC approved the MWB plans for all the entities, Songer, BNL, O'Connell Electric also, but they released the payments around June 15th. As I mentioned, we started working at the end of May to coordinate with Jadestone to come to the site. Their first available date was July 19th. They come from Watertown. Believe it or not, like there's not a lot of these firms around, and they are servicing projects all over the state. So that was their first available time slot, and they've been working on it since. We have weekly meetings with them, pressing, I guess, if you want to say, on the cost updates, because that was probably really our biggest unknown between when we paused and now, because that aspect of the design had not progressed at all. So our target's November 15th to get a set into DEC to review. There may still be things that we're tweaking in between while they're looking at it, but we want to get that ball rolling. I have 2 months in there, and I'm not putting the notes on there to just cover myself, but we have 2 months for EFC to review things.
Is that optimistic?
It is.
Yeah, because I was looking at line items 7, 8, and 9 and wondering how those seem. I'm just wondering how realistic those are.
You would think 2 months is enough time for them to review the plans. They have no design authority per se, but
We believe it is a reasonable estimate of the
Yeah.
amount of time it should take, and it used to be less time than that. Will it be that? We will press upon them the importance of trying to move it forward and how we can get some comments timely on it, but
And then you give yourself 1 month for final revisions, and then there's a month and 10 days for bidding.
Mhm.
Because you have, so the final revisions includes assembling bid packages?
So those are
I
all,
mean, when it
will be
goes into
ready
regulatory,
to
it's ready for
DEC.
bid.
Yeah, so there's a whole spec book with each of the contracts broken out. There's plans and specifications for both the general and the electrical construction, so, it's there, minus any tweaks or coordination. Because we're probably gonna be getting the electrical drawings on the 14th, so I guarantee there'll be some additional coordination that we need to do while they're looking at it, but nothing dramatic to be expected. So we're not gonna stop on the 14th, or sorry, 15th, or whatever it is, November. We're gonna make sure that it progresses and get any comments from the village, anything from your operations staff that needs to get implemented. We'll do that while they're looking at it also. But our goal and what we usually try and press upon them is, we're trying to get ready for a certain time frame of the year. Bidding this in October of next year is not a good time frame. It just, nothing will work out. For
Right.
construction, we would lose a whole construction year, so.
Right.
Yeah, so usually when we submit it, we try to put an email or a letter with it says, this is when we plan to bid it. Here's the bid date.
So April of 2024 is like the first next milestone where we find out where we are in terms of like our remaining contingency and budget. And then during the construction phase, there may be change orders. So,
Do you include a standard item, like
An allowance?
an allowance
That's
for
what-
change orders?
That's what we did for the UV project, yeah. I would recommend that here also.
Everybody understand what that is? So, so that the document that's bid requires that the bidder include an allowance for change orders.
Okay.
but
And what, it doesn't get spent unless it gets spent. I mean, we don't pay it unless it gets spent in change orders.
they usually find excuses for to gobble the allowances or
They try,
no?
yeah. they
Yeah.
do.
But that's our
And
responsibility.
does the cost estimate with the $750,000 contingency include allowances?
No, the allowances would be a part of that 750, because that's basically what it is. It's a
Yeah.
contingency. We did that for the UV project. The only thing that they stumbled across was there was a groundwater issue that wasn't known, because at the time there was no geotech work done. It wasn't done until this big project, so we paid them a little extra to get the groundwater down so that they could work in the tank.
Yeah, this is why I was asking about the 25% contingency, because that seemed really low to me for an early, like, stage engineering report.
It depends, even like way back in 2018, there were agencies that wouldn't allow that much, right? Didn't rural development,
You roll it
they-
into the, above the line,
Roll it in above the line.
yeah. Okay.
So the notes on there are just, we're assuming a regulatory review of 2 months. That the disk filtration system's gonna stay within the building as we have it designed right now. There's been some questions an ask of, an alternate building setup, but unfortunately, we're talking $800,000 or more for a specialty building. We feel the building there, although it's not pristine, will work. We're using the existing concrete tank to put the disk filter in, and that's in perfectly good shape. We're gonna probably do some small, like, fan revisions, some small, like, HVAC type things for that building. And as we talked with Barry a little bit about, if for some reason down the road, the village wants to take down that large structure, we could look at building a smaller building on top of the concrete structure that's there, that's housing that the tertiary filter will be in. So it would be a much smaller building instead of, right now, if you've ever been in that one, those tertiary filters are kind of like huge swimming pools. They're just open water, and this is gonna be piped, so we're gonna be eliminating all the dehumidification type issues. It's water in, water out right through a disc filter, so you're not gonna have the humidity in the summer, which is kind of impacting the quality of the building.
Do you have a risk register for this project?
I don't know what that is.
Like a risk register where you identify the potential risks to the schedule, to the project, moving forward within budget, to any kind of unforeseen circumstances, and then what are the mitigating, what mitigating steps and plans are we taking?
I've never used that term, I like the term. I would say we do that when we get through final QA/QC. What's the longest lead time? What's the most complicated thing to build? Where's the risk factor in terms of change orders, where cost could come? And we typically do a memo on that talks about it. It kind of ties in almost an asset management approach to it, in that sense.
Like with the final cost estimate, but, and all of those, you know, the construction is all based on current estimates of the vendors and the lead times that they have in their proposals.
You
Some
know, one
of
of the
that is
biggest
also
items,
stuff.
one of the most not complicated, one of the hardest items is, not hard, it's been very difficult since COVID, and supply chain issues seem to be improving, but there's not enough labor to build things out there, and where does that affect cost? I mean, we've recently built two water line projects and a town hall rehabilitation, and they've all three have, knock on wood, came in under budget. What does it mean specific to this one? I don't know, because sometimes, you know, that fluctuates. I mean, I felt like pre-COVID, if it was 17, 18, 2015, anything like that, it was much more, you had a handle on what was out there, what was being bid, how busy people were, and where the numbers came in.
Right.
It has been all over the board since 2020, it truly has.
So usually when we put stuff out to bid, we reach out to contractors that we know can perform this work, because we want to have qualified people looking at it. We want to make sure they don't miss the advertisement or something like that along the way. We always hold a pre-bid walkthrough so they can see it, so they can ask questions. We can address anything in an addendum there. Again, kind of like your risk management type question, I guess. But that takes place in the 5-week window. If for some reason we're not getting a warm and fuzzy, that we're getting a lot of interest, we would probably recommend to the village to maybe extend it 2 weeks. We don't want to keep perpetuating the schedule, but there's no reason to put it out for bid and get one bidder, because if they know they're the only game in town, it's not going to be a good number. And we've had that happen in other communities, unfortunately, and they've had to go out to rebid, which just extends the whole process. So we try and keep a handle on who has the bid documents, who's asking questions, and again, we reach out to the ones that we feel in this area would be qualified. We've had contractors calling us since the UV project, knowing that this project is out there, so we'll just make sure that they're still aware of it and are interested in moving forward with it. I think that's the last slide. Got a little.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks for doing
very
this.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think, I'm interested in, like, how often is reasonable for the board to get updates, like, what milestones make sense?
We can base it on this time.
That's what I was thinking about, like, the final, so it looks like early 2024, and then,
April, right? Wasn't there
so this looks like quarterly updates until we end up in construction. And then maybe we can have, like, 1 or 2 updates during the construction period. And then, just when we get these monthly progress reports, they can go to the board. Because this is a big project for us.
Sure.
And it looks like it's gonna be over
I think that's
budget.
reasonable. Is it okay with you, quarterly
Yeah.
updates?
I would think when we have the meetings with the smaller team, we'll take the notes, we'll distribute it appropriately to the
Yeah.
board for the meetings.
Thank you. The next time, maybe we don't need all the lead up, and we can just have an update what's happened since.
Absolutely, this
Right.
was a long one.
No, this is appreciated.
It was
Very
needed, but
Yes.
yes. And then if we have anything major that we see come up regulatory wise, or what we hear, we can, you know, whether we come down, whether we have on Zoom, on part of a meeting, we don't wanna take up time every meeting, but we wanna make sure everybody is well informed.
So, and I'm assuming that's how those monthly meetings are how the village would be informed of any issues or any schedule slip or, any,
Right, we have like a kind of a standard agenda, like it used to be the UV project was on, that's on and off, just about closing out with the contractor, same thing. We always talk about EFC and where things stood, DEC and where things stood, this project. And now we're kind of discussing the electrical and, you know, some of the other cost issues that have come up.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you for
Yeah,
taking
thank you.
the trip. We appreciate
But if
it.
there's
Yeah.
certain formats that you want, just
Could I
let us know.
ask, could you, have your presentation sent to the clerk so that she can distribute it to the board.
Absolutely.
So that we can delve into it a little deeper. It's a
Oh,
little
yeah,
difficult to read
that's
it
a
off
great
the
idea.
screen,
Yeah,
yes, it
but
is.
that I think would be helpful for all the board members.
Yeah, and let me just add in, when we talked about the next real major update, I actually think it's earlier than what you mentioned, because what we've got to figure out is, what number do you still want, what do we feel comfortable when the design is done with contingency? Right, it's basically saying you've got to go figure out and go get more money, which means you've got to go adjust your bond resolution. I mean, there's statutory steps
right.
that need to be done.
Yeah, and
So that's gonna need to be done, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
you asked
next
about a
month.
format, I'm assuming for like the progress updates. I mean, I think it's like, you know, what's been done over the last period, what's coming, but then a key element of that would be any key considerations, decisions, or risks that we've identified and how we're mitigating them. I think that's important, because looking ahead, it seems like there were a lot of unforeseen, I mean, when you're working with a state agency, there's always going to be bumps, especially with external funding and things like that, but it seems like, you know, if we can be foreseeing and communicating about those things ahead of time and how we're dealing with them, I think that will, I know I'll be happy with that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much,
you.
appreciate it.
The meeting starts.
Steve's probably really looking forward to sitting down.
Gotta be careful what I
Raina
wish for.
offered you a seat,
I
Steve.
So, onward.
Sorry about that. Silence myself.
Announcement.
Yes, Barry, do you want to take the first announcement?
Please take notice that on-street parking within the Village of Warwick is prohibited between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. from November 1st through April 1st.
Great. And I'd also like to make an announcement. This is on our website and on our Facebook page, and we've talked about it in previous meetings, but it's the paving and improvements projects for New York State Routes 94 and 17A in the town of Goshen, Warwick, Village of Florida, and the Village of Warwick. And that open house that they are putting together is this coming Thursday, October 19th, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at Florida Village Hall, 33 South Street, Florida, New York. The New York State Department of Transportation will host an open house to present proposed improvements to New York State Route 94 and 17A. The project will improve drainage structures, pedestrian facilities, intersections, and sections of pavement along various segments of Route 94 and Route 17A. The project limits are in various locations along Route 94 and Route 17A from the New Jersey state line to the town of Goshen line, and along Route 17A from Warwick to Belleville. And those unable to attend can provide comments to Mr. Oscar Olart, New York State Department of Transportation, 4 Burnett Boulevard, Poughkeepsie, New York, 12603. And that information again is on our website and on our Facebook post.
And just so folks, if folks are not familiar with the numbers, like those are the two main state roads that are
Thank you.
within the village, and that includes Main Street, Oakland Avenue, and Galloway. So those are large sections of the
And Maple.
village.
And a small stretch of Maple.
And a small stretch of Maple.
Right. And it includes the, ultimately, the change in the intersection of Colonial and Route 94 from a Y intersection basically to a T intersection with turning lanes. And that's a very significant change and something that the village has been working with DOT to push forward.
And it should include the update and upgrade of all existing sidewalks on those pathways, along those roadways to ADA compliance. And so there are a number of sidewalks actually along Galloway that are pretty ancient. And so we would love, for folks to come out and also help us make sure that those are included in the design.
Yes. I mean, we are taking them to task on that. But the more public opinion that we have, the more neighbors that we have, the greater the voice. And I think it would be a very important for this team, not us, but the team from DOT, to hear and see that. So.
And now's the time to do it, right? I mean, when's the next time they're gonna pave that road?
Right.
Yeah,
Long
good
time.
point.
Okay.
Yeah, and they are also for major, so there are improvements that are happening, and when they do improvements to roadways, they have a complete streets policy at the state level, and they're supposed to consider bicycle and pedestrian needs. So that's something that, we really want to make sure is included, because when these roadways were installed, obviously the needs of the community were different. And the conditions were different. So they're doing drainage improvements to recognize that, and we want to make sure that they also include pedestrian and bicycle-related complete streets improvements to recognize other changes.
Under correspondence, the Village of Warwick Planning Board, we have a letter from the Village of Warwick Planning Board as a declaration of lead agency in coordinated SECRA review for the special use permit and site plan approval application submitted by Warwick LLC in regard to the property located at 8 Forester Avenue. And we have a number of things under discussion that some I would like to put towards the, for example, on battery storage moratorium, we have a motion. So I think we can put that discussion on that motion after the second, after it's seconded. Community choice aggregation, Steve, you wanted to speak to the board on that, so.
Yeah, briefly as far as that goes. Well, it appears you've done some groundwork as far as community choice aggregation. I don't know how much you need me to go into the fundamentals of it. Suffice it to say that it's program allowed by the PSC that the board can enact, which allows a bulk purchase of energy for all the residents in the village. In order to affect a program like this, you're going to need to enact a local law, and you've been provided with kind of a vanilla local law. There is an opt-in and an opt-out provision, and you have to decide which one of the two you want to pursue. I can tell you that most municipalities who go this route prefer the opt-out provision. Okay, well, you guys are ahead of me then. So if you want to proceed with it, you'll need to enact a local law. I'll be happy to draft it up with whatever changes you may want to see to it. And then you're going to have to hire an operator, an agent who will actually go out and procure, and it's written right into the law, who go out and procure various contracts for you. It would be considered professional services. Nevertheless, you should put out an RFP for it to have the best deal that you can in terms of having the person come in. And that's pretty much where you are. I can say this too, a lot of municipalities like to partner with other local municipalities. Obviously, the more houses, businesses, properties you have involved, the greater your purchasing power, the better the deal that your agents are going to be able to cut for you. So if you want to undertake this, that's great, but you may want to reach out to Florida, the town, whoever else, see if somebody else
We have had that discussion, but we're further along. But we can still continue that discussion.
And the
administrator
provider
does
can
it.
ultimately create the package of the,
And you can add in people later
Yeah.
as far as that goes. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to hold you back. Just be nice if everybody's on the same page from the get-go.
Yeah, Steve, I believe the administrator would get a cohort together, and once they have enough numbers, then they go out and try to get bids.
that part's
That
their
would make the most sense in
responsibility.
terms of getting you the best deal. That doesn't prevent you from enacting local law, though, if you want to.
So if we proceed without other municipalities involved and engaged in doing what we're doing, then we have less buying power because we have
Not-
fewer customers to present?
Not
Well,
necessarily.
but that's what Jewel touted. Jewel touted
No.
what was going on in Rockland County and all the municipalities that they've put together to get the lowest price.
What they do though is they'll assemble. So it's nice if we're all like in the same, like it would be nice if it was the whole town that did it together, but the provider is ultimately doing the work of assembling kind of the group purchase agreement.
But
So-
until that's
Maybe lumped
assembled,
in.
we're at somewhat of a disadvantage
No, I
relative
think
to
that
the
they would,
pricing.
I think they would lump us in with someone else.
Yeah.
Jewel told us they couldn't lump us in with Rockland.
They
Because they're
can't-
starting a new cohort.
But they're starting a new cohort, so there's multiple entities. And also, we don't actually have to move forward with bidding until we have assembled a large enough group. But what the regulation, what the local law enables us to do is to begin that process. And part of the reason that I think we should begin it sooner rather than later is by having that entity on board that also enables us to have other energy consulting services. So they also provide support in other funding. So like, for example, with elective pay, that was something that, one of the things that Jewel identified.
But until we actually have a contract and have this program in place, that company doesn't get any income.
Correct.
And they're gonna provide us services without any income?
But they're the ones, so the process as I understand it is we will enact the local law. And so we sent the language to Stephen, really interested in whether or not there's any adjustments you would recommend. And then the second thing is that we would release an RFP and again, would be interested in your feedback on any adjustments. The RFP would then potentially hire the energy provider. They would begin doing two things. One, they would begin doing the outreach, because there's a whole outreach and engagement process that is required. And then they would also begin working out that cohort, because at any given point in time, they have other municipalities that are also working on being part of a cohort. So it would be great if the town joined us. I would not want to wait around. I'm hoping that this can be a catalyst for other action because we start working through this process. But at, like 2 years, let's say it takes them 2 years to do it. Let's say we don't have a big enough cohort for another year, like then we would issue the bid package when we have a large enough cohort. That's my understanding.
I didn't
They
get that
can
rosy
assemble,
picture when I heard Jewel speak
There's
to
no
us.
guarantee they can assemble a cohort for you.
Well, they did.
There's
They
no
they
ga-
may very well be able to, but there's no guarantee. You may
Yeah.
wind up on your own.
It may, no, the thing is, we will not accept a bid from a power provider that doesn't result in savings to the residents.
Yes, you
So if
have
we're
to
not a
prove
large
it
enough
when you
cohort
start,
to do
and
that,
just
then
when you
that would be delayed. So this process really just enables us, there's no point in delaying our ability to make those decisions, just because other people have not decided whether they want to have the ability to make those decisions.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think us moving forward would be a catalyst for our, municipalities that surround us, and including the town, so.
And even if the administrator gets a cohort together, if they don't like the prices they're receiving from energy suppliers, it might not even happen. That's what they told us. If they don't
They'll
think
delay
it's
it. Yeah.
they'll delay it until they find something.
There's no
Better.
requirement under the law that you undertake to purchase the electricity. It's not like you say, this law's in place, bang, we gotta pay whatever the best price. People here could just stay with O&R or whoever it is.
Sure.
That's correct.
This is-
Yeah.
They could opt out.
They cannot.
Yeah,
Right.
and they can-
And what I gathered from Jewel was that this process does take a long time, and that's why we kind of made the decision to pass the local law as soon as possible so we can get started.
Depends on how many people join and how quickly,
Right.
brought in a bunch of people.
Well, as far as
It would
like
go rather quick
outreach,
soon.
yeah.
The outreach is a whole other thing. The rollout on this takes time. You're gonna have meetings, you're gonna be posting things on your website, you're gonna be sending out mailings. It's
Yeah.
very confusing for people when
Yeah.
you say, hey,
No, I
guess what,
understand.
your electricity provider is, you wouldn't think it, but it is.
Changing.
Very, very confusing.
No, I.
But
would
there's some good
imagine.
models. I mean, Westchester has definitely done a great job
Programs
in
can
terms
work
of.
out very well, and everybody in the area can save quite a bit on their electricity if it works out.
Right.
Right.
So how does the cohort establish the mix of electrical or energy sources that are included in the mix? Because that's going to dictate the price.
There's a bid, so my understanding is that everything still goes through Orange and Rockland, but the source power provider to Orange and Rockland, did I say Energy and Rockland? I meant to Orange and Rockland.
I think
Oh,
we
I
knew
did.
what you meant.
We understood.
It's late.
Yeah.
The source power provider is what will change, and so they'll assemble the bid, once they have a cohort, they'll assemble the bid package, and the different source providers will bid for the opportunity to be our preferred power provider, and so they'll go with the lower, but the village can decide whether they want to go with 100% green energy or just the standard.
And each municipality that's part of the cohort makes that decision on their own?
I'm not
Or does the
sure.
cohort have to make
That's a good
that
question.
decision?
Cohort makes that decision.
So we
Only
would
seen
have
with
to,
electricity, I've never seen propane or anything like that. I'm sure there are some, I just haven't seen them. But yeah, there's one bid that comes in. I don't think there are multiple bids and you can pick and choose.
Well, they
company
pick the
does
bid
that.
that is appropriate. Multiple source providers will
I
bid.
understand that. What I'm saying is, if you have one bid that's for green energy and one bid that's at the standard rate, I don't think one municipality could take one bid, another take another bid. and a third.
Oh, yeah,
I think
yeah.
the bid is what's accepted and that's what you get.
I do think that's a good question that we should ask them, just to double check.
because if we're in a cohort with dissimilar thoughts as to how much green energy should be part of the equation,
No, I think that's how they assign you to a cohort in the first place. Either renewables or fossil fuels.
but that can
Both
change.
are designed to lower the rate and have collective purchasing power. But I think, from what I understand from listening to Jewel, we decide that up front. That depends on how we're lumped in.
but what happens when one of the other municipalities in the cohort, their board changes and their attitude towards how they want to
Then they're out.
decide, what energy mix they want from, in terms of sources, that could change.
Yeah, I think you're under contract for 2 years, so then they end up locked in for 2 years,
Right.
and then they could change, and then they could change and
Go
and
forward.
I thought, so don't quote me on this, but I thought that they would get the two, because they kept showing us the two values, the green value and the standard
Yeah.
value. So I thought that when they did the bid that you would get them both, but we should confirm that. The other reason that I see this as really attractive is their model for doing like energy master planning and energy support. So this is not the only, my understanding from, their presentation and just kind of like some of what was in the RFP is that they provide broader energy consulting services. Obviously, they're not gonna do anything that is not gonna benefit them. But when we release, and they provide support with funding, and so when they release bids, they would release bids on our behalf for other energy-related projects as needed, and they get paid the same way for those projects as they would for CCA. And with the IRA, and all of the incentives, I thought if this is gonna be a multi-year process, then it would be better for us to be having someone on hand that can help think through some of those things sooner rather than later. It may not be
That's a good
perfect,
point.
like, they may only give us a little bit, but,
So, what's the next step?
Prepare the local law,
Yeah.
introduce it, hold a public hearing. If you adopt it, then you're gonna wanna begin putting out your RFP, because you're not gonna implement the program until, like I said, you go through this big rollout. And that's when you would begin. How soon after that you actually get to purchase the energy, I can't tell you. It may depend on who it is you hire.
And I only know of the two companies. I've spoken to the two companies, Good Energy
Good
and
Energy
Jewel.
and Jewel, yeah.
Yeah, have you spoken with anybody else?
No.
Okay.
Good, well, so why don't we move forward and,
Yeah, I'll prepare the draft, I'll circulate it with a memo,
Okay.
with comments, then the board can, you know, do what it sees fit on that. I can't promise to you for your next meeting, but I would think the second November meeting
Okay.
would be reasonable target.
sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Okay.
And again, the discussion on climate action plan for government operations, we'll do that at the motion. But we do have Veterans Memorial Park Master Plan, and Carly, I'm going to hand you that baton.
Sure.
If you want to talk
And
about it.
I think we could potentially talk about it in more detail at the next meeting,
Yeah.
if that's appropriate. But I do want to point out, and thank you very much, Diane, for printing this up, because actually Barry pointed out that it's really useful to have this printout. So this is the final draft from Karen Arndt. This includes all the comments from the public process, as well as all of the new survey information. And so included is the plan, and then also our like Instagram board, which is basically like what this stuff can look like. So this is available electronically on the website as part of the agenda, and then it's also available here in hard copy. So I was hoping that we could have a discussion, and then we could move forward with adoption.
Adoption.
So that we can move forward with implementation. So,
Because there's a lot of people at the gate.
there are a lot of people at the gate. They're like, where is this? So, but we had to get a new survey, you know, which took a long time, and but we're excited to be at this final, in this place.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very excited. It's a beautiful plan and with a tremendous amount of work by our community. I mean, it was truly a community effort. And Carly, thank you for the guidance through that. You did remarkable things, so.
Our stakeholder advisory group was awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, that was good. And then also just to emphasize, this is a plan, it's a conceptual plan, which means that the final designs could change as we progress through implementation. So it's more about like what is happening than like this monument will go, this little thing will go exactly in this spot, you
Right.
know?
It's a broad stroke, but an overall vision. Yeah. So now we're at public comment. Anybody would like to address the board? On agenda items only, of course.
Is it appropriate to comment on the CCA discussion?
Yes, you surely may.
What I've been able to learn about CCA, I'm sorry, Scott Brown.
Thank you.
Village resident. There's, including in the draft, I think there's a mention of objectives of lowering cost and increasing the use of green energy. I haven't been able to find in the broader internet or in the presentation we saw before, or the information that's included in the agenda, how those objectives are balanced when they're in conflict. So it seems to me that it's possible, maybe likely, that green energy isn't always going to be less expensive. So there's a provision in the local law template for an advisory board, and I think you brought up some questions in the discussion that are not only relevant but really important about how those choices get made, whether it's a mix of energy sources or we get one source for 2 years, whether there's conflicts among members of the cohort, or just in a general sense, when green energy use and cost are in conflict with one another, who gets to decide how those are balanced?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's a
okay.
great question. And the whole idea of CCA, well, not the whole idea, but the goal is that overall, whether you're, because of your collective bargaining power, you're able to receive a rate that is lower than what you get as like an individual with your, you know, contract with the power provider. So we wouldn't move forward in theory, because we haven't done this yet, but my understanding is we would not move forward with any new source provider unless it was a guarantee of lower costs, and that's at per, or, you know, because also it varies, right? The Orange and Rockland rate that you have as an individual is going to vary. So if we're gonna have to compare what it's been and where it's going and make our best, you know, assessment that this is going to result in much lower costs for residents. And then the green energy piece is usually, you know, from what they showed us, it is a little higher than like the baseline, but then that would be still lower, ideally, than what we're paying. So that's kind of the concept. And so I think that's what would have to be discussed, and we need to understand kind of the flexibility and that decision-making power.
Yep,
Yeah.
it raises a little bit of a concern as we roll forward, drafting a local law template. And again, there's just a paragraph provision in there for an advisory board. It's not entirely clear what that does or how much power we have as a member of that cohort versus the agent that's gonna make those choices presumably for us. So I would
Those are
just
great questions.
suggest
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really great questions, yeah.
careful with
So
that.
the local law
interested in the
gets the ball
advisory?
rolling,
Yeah,
right? The local law gets the ball rolling,
Oh, yeah.
but we don't decide anything until we've
until
seen the final
Well,
bids.
we'll decide specifically the provisions in the local law
right.
that you guys will pass or not pass.
Well, the local law authorizes us to take advantage of the home rule
That's
ability,
All-
our
that's
ability,
what
that
that's-
home rule law. And what do you make that face?
I'm looking at that
You're
face too.
enacting it under this form roll laws.
That's what I'm saying, it
Listen what you're
enables us
saying. I'm sorry,
we are now authorized to make these decisions through our local law. We're saying, we are saying that we have the ability to make this decision, but we're not making decisions yet. We've only decided that we wanna decide. That's what the
Well,
local
they've
law
activated
is.
a program which you can activate when you're ready to activate it.
Yes.
Okay.
I've gone over my 3 minutes, but I read the template for the local law this afternoon, and there are some very specific provisions in there that essentially lock us into a way of dealing with the agent going forward, and I just wanted to
Right.
Like
raise
that.
some concern. And say,
Yeah, definitely.
But there'll be a
Should think about it.
contract with the agent, and you can vary the terms in that. So, I mean, I think Carly said it
Thank
appropriately.
you.
It's, you know, this is gonna allow you to move forward. It's not gonna mandate you to do anything.
Great.
There are some decisions that will be made, having said that.
Yeah.
So we talked about like the opt-in or the opt-out and so forth. But you can always amend the local law if you don't like the terms of it. So even then, there's flexibility.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you for reading it.
Stepping stone.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're gonna move on to motions. Trustee Cheney.
Motion to grant permission to the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post number 4662 to hold the Veterans Day Parade Saturday, November 11th, 2023, as per their facility use application and parade map received October 3rd, 2023. Parade lineup will take place on High Street at 10:30 a.m. with step-off beginning at 11:11 a.m. The parade will culminate with a ceremony at Veterans Memorial Park at approximately 12 p.m. The parade route has been approved by the Town of Warwick Police Department. Completed park permit, security deposit, and proof of insurance have been received.
Do I have a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to grant permission to Village of Warwick employee Chris Kane to carry over 5 vacation days.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to hire Barton and LeJudas to perform a lead service line inventory of the village's water distribution system as part of the 2022 bipartisan infrastructure law lead service line replacement, BIL-LSLR, funding through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, DWSRF. 2 statements of qualifications were received.
Second.
Discussion. I just want to kind of carry forward some of the requests for some of those project management procedures that we talked about during the last presentation. So that the consultant provides, that we get a schedule and then we decide kind of when it makes sense to provide an update to the board.
Mhm.
And
I agree.
that there's progress reports you know, and that we understand and the outcomes of the assessment as a board.
Yeah, that structure, I think, is really critical. So, I don't know if it should that be in the motion, or I think that
That's a procedure.
that's a
Yeah, it's
procedure,
just a
yeah.
procedure.
You need to put it in the motion.
Okay, just check. Okay, so we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And Tom?
I prefer not to make that next motion.
Oh, well, if,
You need to go into executive
yeah, do
session.
we need to go into executive session on this? Yeah, potentially we do. So, where's my little,
It's right under your computer.
Oh,
oh, there you go. So, could we make a motion to seek confidential advice?
okay, motion to go into
But
executive.
I'm sorry, may I make a suggestion? Can we do this at the end? So then,
But then, so we're tabling the
Are
motion?
we tabling?
or
Yeah.
could we do this at, I mean, as the very last motion is my point.
Well, then we have to table,
And then we can go into executive session and then conclude the meeting.
but then we'd have to come back.
But we'd have to come
conclude
back
the
if we
meeting.
Oh,
wanted
to-
to vote on it, so.
I understand. Yeah.
So do you want me to continue, or do you want to just table it?
No, let's continue. We've
Okay.
already tabled it.
Motion to go into executive session to seek confidential advice of counsel.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we will be coming back to this board meeting to continue our agenda, if you're interested.
So
Do we wanna go in the
we're
other
going to
room?
We can go in the
your
other
office,
room, yeah.
Ann's office.
So we'll leave you alone.
I may get the rest online.
So you may not have to hear everyone else maybe. I'm still, you're still sorry.
You stay.
Okay.
All right.
Is this
We're
a
back.
riveting?
I'm like, I'm trying, I was like, I gotta really wake up with it.
Or I can step outside, that's.